Elma tensed as Marquis Haltorp spoke openly about Magic World. The Marquis reasoned that anyone carrying knowledge from that era could deliberately trigger a dream hole disaster. Then he warned Elma not to cling to one suspicion and twist every clue around it. His laughter did nothing to hide the fact that he was testing Elma. The room laughed with Haltorp, while Elma compared him with the rigid Warren. One man was stubborn, the other cunning, and cooperation between them seemed impossible. Haltorp then said he was betting on Elma. Surviving the king's wanderer and bringing it under control was exceptional, so Elma accepted the praise without lowering his guard. Marquis Haltorp praised Snow for overcoming her shyness and inviting the guests herself. With Snow seated beside him, he turned to Elma and said Elma's unusual class and impeccable strength made him exceptional. Haltorp then asked why Elma did not marry Snow. The entire table recoiled at once. Luce coughed violently, Snow blushed and cried out to her father, and another guest protested that the Marquis was taking the joke too far. Even the armored woman laughed nervously and said the suggestion was unusual for a commoner and a noble lady. Elma could only stare in silent confusion while Haltorp grinned. Marquis Haltorp offered to lend Elma his strength, saying it would put the Union under his control and let him take whatever he wanted. Then he asked whether Elma came from the Bryon family. The question caught Elma off guard, and he gasped in shock. Someone noted that with swordsmanship like his, he had to be noble-born. Elma's face darkened and his fist clenched tight. He answered that he was satisfied with his current position and would rather the Marquis not touch that subject. Haltorp apologized lightly, said he would change the subject, and told a wary Elma he would get to the main point. Under the same conditions as their previous arrangement, Haltorp asked Elma to join another large-scale request. After they left the meeting, Snow asked whether he intended to accept. Elma did not answer immediately. The request was clearly connected to the looming disaster, but moving before they understood Haltorp's full intentions could place everyone in even greater danger. Haltorp wanted them to confirm the true objective of Zero Dream Destruction and expose the reckless people operating inside his territory. Elma realized the Marquis had reached the same conclusion he had. Another destruction could erase the city and kill tens of thousands. Snow argued that launching a large-scale request would itself be dangerous. Elma agreed, yet Haltorp intended to proceed, and this might be their final chance to catch the culprit. Worse, the Marquis had been probing them while deciding how much to reveal. Elma still wanted to solve the case. He carried knowledge from Magic World, and he was also a noble born with a duty to protect the kingdom. But responsibility did not mean rushing into Haltorp's game. The case was too dangerous for that. Elma told Snow they had to be extremely careful, avoid any rash move, and give themselves a little more time. Inside the tavern, Celt set down his mug and admitted why he had refused when Elma invited him and Luce to join the party. His sixth sense had triggered and left him with a nasty feeling. When Luce sternly asked why he had kept that warning to himself, Celt first denied hiding anything, then explained the skill. It normally reacted when dangerous monsters or rare treasure chests were nearby, but its warnings were unreliable. Celt said he had shared such feelings before, only for nothing to happen. He did not want Elma and Luce enduring complaints because of another useless alarm, and he argued that spreading unproven information was like accusing someone of a crime. Luce fixed him with an earnest stare, while Elma conceded that his concern was fair. Luce bowed and apologized for answering out of turn, while Celt sat at the table with a gloomy expression. Elma considered how uncertain warnings could become even more dangerous in a world where reliable information was difficult to share. Celt finally admitted there had been a time when he had passed along false information himself. Luce calmly said she accepted his apology, then warned that she would complain to Mabel if he hid the next warning. Celt sprang up in panic and begged her not to do that. He complained that Mabel had become a nuisance every time they crossed paths after their last raid. His own memories showed her cheerfully greeting him while he worked alone, questioning what petty money-making scheme he was plotting, and mocking gambling as a complete waste. The more Kelt protested, the more obvious it became that Maybelle was simply teasing him whenever she found him. Elma watched the pair across the table and dryly said he was glad they were getting along. Luce smiled while Kelt was left with no convincing answer. Elma returned to the important detail and observed that Kelt's sixth sense reacted to more than monsters and treasure. The displayed skill description only promised to detect approaching dangerous monsters and the rare existence of valuable items. That wording reminded Elma of a fisherman from Magic World who had once claimed his sixth sense told him to finish work early. Elma considered whether consistent background dialogue revealed a broader meaning hidden behind the short description. He decided it was the closest explanation available, yet remained uneasy. While Luce and Kelt quietly drank from their mugs, Elma felt that something about sixth sense still did not fit and that he was overlooking an important clue. Kelt promised that he would tell Elma the next time sixth sense activated, and he insisted he was not petty enough to hold a grudge over their earlier disagreement. Elma answered that resentment was not the issue. He acknowledged that the previous adventure had succeeded from beginning to end and produced many rare items, then revealed the more troubling development. Lady Snow had invited him and Luce to the Howroad Manor the day before, placing both adventurers on the household's radar. Kelt jolted in disbelief, then loudly complained that Elma was already in the Count's good graces and said he wanted to accompany them. His jealousy vanished when he connected the invitation with the rumored large-scale raid. He lowered his voice and asked whether they were about to be pulled into another dangerous request. Kelt gripped the table and said the mention of the Howroad household reminded him of a rumor. Count Howroad was preparing to announce another raid request soon. He recalled the disturbing stone found after the earlier incident and explained that a similar stone had now appeared somewhere else. Carlos, the rank adventurer known as the Blackened Flameblade, was expected to lead the Count's troops again. Kelt also reported the Count's furious promise to expose the fools who had treated his domain like a playground. Elma and Luce fell silent as the warning connected the new raid with the earlier disaster. Their grave expressions made Kelt pause and ask why both of them suddenly looked so obedient and troubled. Kelt warned that the rumors pointed to political conflict and said the safest choice was to stay away. Elma asked what Kelt intended to do. He claimed it was nothing, but admitted that he felt the same danger Elma did. Sixth Sense had connected the invitation, the raid, and the Howroad household, while the crucial meaning still remained just beyond Elma's reach. Elma and Luce entered the La Corina Adventurers Guild and followed Matilda through its high corridors. Matilda said Lady Halen had expected the two adventurers to appear again, although she had not thought they would arrive without notice. Elma apologized and admitted he should have contacted the guild first, but there had been little time. The uproar surrounding the lamenting trapezohedron had made him cautious about acting. That strange crystal had become a focal point for guild decisions and policy, and Elma believed Halen knew more about the matter than anyone else. What he truly wanted to understand at any cost was Count Hardin's raid request and the reason behind it. Matilda said Halen would certainly welcome them and went to check with her. Elma and Luce thanked her, but urgent knocking interrupted the quiet office almost immediately. From behind the closed door, Matilda called out to Lady Halen. Halen told Matilda to enter, and the attendant hurried into an office buried under stacks of documents. Matilda reported that two adventurers had vanished within the previous month and called the situation urgent. Halen was already overwhelmed by the continuing missing person investigations and by an approaching meeting with the merchant's leader. Matilda asked whether the raid request could be delayed, only to draw Halen's anger for not leading with the disappearances. In the confusion, Matilda finally noticed Elma and Luce and recognized them as Lord Elma's and Lady Rouche. Halen rushed forward, pulled Matilda close, and eagerly invited the visitors inside. She immediately tried to recruit them for her branch, but Elma explained that they had not come to accept employment. Helen's excitement collapsed into visible disappointment as she quietly accepted his refusal. Helen dragged her chair back into place, cleared her throat, and composed herself behind the mountain of paperwork. She thanked Elma and Luce for rescuing Lady Snow and admitted that she had not expected them to resolve the affair so quickly. When she asked what had brought them to the guild, Elma directly questioned whether she knew what Count Harden had asked of them. His words sharpened Helen's expression. She stared at the documents on her desk, then fixed Elma with a guarded look that made the room suddenly tense. Rather than answer in front of her attendant, Helen ordered Matilda to give them the room. The startled woman obeyed, stepped into the corridor, and closed the tall double doors behind her. Only then were Helen, Elma, and Luce alone to discuss the Count's secret request. Once the room was sealed, Helen slid a document across the crowded desk and said she understood why Elma had come. A messenger had already informed her that Count Harden wanted him to investigate a traitor during the raid. Elma recoiled at the weight of that responsibility. In his mind, Harden was arranging ordinary adventurers like pieces on a chessboard. If the matter was an internal crime, clearing someone who already stood beneath the Count's influence would have been simpler. Instead, Harden had inserted Elma and Luce among the other participants. Elma could not tell what the Count was thinking first, or whether he had an entirely different objective hidden behind the request. Helen explained that the raid would begin the next morning at the submerged capital of dreams, a high-level dream hole. Monster activity around it was increasing, and a crystal resembling the one from the Graveyard of Grief had appeared. Only powerful adventurers could face the threat, directly linking this mission to the earlier Wanderer disaster. Elma asked whether Harden wanted him to identify whoever triggered that Wanderer. Helen had read the guild report and found nothing suspicious, so Elma requested it himself. No adventurer had traveled alone, nobody fled the dream hole, and the guild arranged every party. A coordinated false story seemed impossible. Someone might still be lying for another reason, but Harden could call any liar an enemy. Helen suggested reporting no evidence if that was the truth, while Elma remained troubled by the Count's hidden purpose. The La Corina Guildhall overflowed with adventurers answering the large-scale request. Excited fighters wondered what was happening around the city and noted that even top-tier adventurers had gathered. The posted mission named the destination as the Submerged Ideal City and recommended level 80 participants because monster activity had increased. Luce stared at the notice and worried that if another Dream Lord evolved, it might approach level 100. Beside her, Elma yawned so heavily that she asked whether he was well. He apologized and admitted he had barely slept. He had spent the entire night reading the investigation report Helen had given him. The report described people whose skill combinations could deceive others and create false alibis, but it lacked enough detail for a firm conclusion. Elma could only speculate. The information helped, yet the many poorly optimized skill sets in this world made every possible culprit and method difficult to predict. Elma apologized for involving Luce in another dangerous case, but she told him not to apologize. She reminded him that they had survived many near-death battles together and said protecting the country and city mattered more. Elma thanked her just as Luce warned him to look down. Hilda stood below with her scythe raised and declared the raid extremely dangerous. She accused Elma of becoming overconfident after recent victories and warned him not to die before she could claim revenge for their duel. Hilda said she intended to participate despite the level 80 requirement. Elma apologized for how immaturely he had behaved during their fight, and the flustered Hilda accepted while insisting she had not forgotten. He then complimented her Soul Reaper scythe. Hilda proudly said its special effect granted a powerful bonus. Elma and Luce immediately suspected she had bought it only because it was on sale. Their suspicion fit the shop's effort to clear the weapon from inventory, even though the supposed bargain had still cost 15 million. Hilda insisted that she could defeat enemies even without mana and asked Elma not to underestimate her. When he asked whether she was joining the raid, she explained that magical swordsmen consumed heavy amounts of energy and the operation faced a manpower shortage. As a B-rank adventurer and apprentice to the blackened Flameblade, she felt obligated to participate. Elma reasoned that Kalos's sixth sense let her avoid relying too heavily on allies during unpredictable exploration, so their team level should be adequate. He then described the likely structure of Kalos's build. A sensing skill suited exploration, but a character built broadly around many shortcomings became a support-focused jack of all trades with limited offensive power. Hilda demanded to know how he understood her master's skills. Elma said he had reverse-engineered the structure, and that sixth sense integrated naturally with a magical swordsman. Luce praised his knowledge, although she admitted his explanation had not been polite. Then a new arrival announced that the submerged Ideal City operation was ready. Hilda rushed toward the newly arrived Kalos and called her master. Kalos smiled and corrected her, saying she had never intended to become Hilda's master. She explained that experienced fighters naturally guided newcomers and that she did not believe she had done very much. Kalos gently added that Hilda had reached her present strength through her own talent and hard work. Hilda froze, flushed, and struggled to answer while Kalos affectionately patted her head. The watching adventurers laughed softly at the awkward exchange, and Hilda insisted that was simply how Kalos always spoke. Elma then asked whether Kalos had been the one who suggested the raid to the guild. Kalos answered that the Haltorp Marquis household had brought the idea to her and had only asked for her advice. Her smile faded as she considered the arrangement. Kalos said something about it smelled suspicious, leaving Elma to repeat the word and wonder exactly what had troubled her. Kalos explained that the main and branch families of the Haltorp house were failing to cooperate, despite the Marquis household's involvement in the raid. She glanced aside and added that someone had already attempted an assassination. The investigators had followed the case and were only beginning to catch its trail. Hilda repeated the word assassination in alarm and asked what her master's warning meant. Kalos answered that there was no doubt the coming raid would be dangerous. Even if the enemy proved to be nobility or the nation itself, she had no intention of backing down. Hilda immediately declared that if Kalos went, she would follow. She proudly lifted her new Soul Reaper scythe and boasted that even a level 80 dream hole could not frighten her now. Kalos stared at the bargain weapon in strained silence, and Elma understood her reaction. The operation was already badly short of resources. Kalos finally offered Hilda a decent sword, but only if Hilda returned the scythe to the shop before the raid. On the evening the large-scale raid was announced, Elma and Luce summoned Kelt and Maybell to the guild. Elma asked them to join while stressing that the mission was dangerous and they could refuse. Kelt immediately guessed that it concerned the submerged Ideal City. Elma confirmed that he intended to participate because the morning trapezohedron was likely involved again, and he could not ignore a threat that had already caused one catastrophe. Kelt leaned across the tavern table and told Elma that his strong sense of justice was dragging him toward a foolish risk. He argued that only people with money to waste took chances like this and insisted the noble troops could handle the mission without them. Elma calmly agreed that protecting the territory was a noble's duty, but Kelt kept listing the forces already gathered. The rank Black Flameblade had come to La Corina, so the raid seemed well supplied without their small party. Kelt then admitted that he ranked among the weaker B-rank adventurers. He pointed across the table and called Maybell a little A-rank adventurer, claiming even she was not enough reason for confidence. Maybell exploded at the description. She reminded Kelt that she was a class healer with extensive combat experience and demanded to know why he treated her as inferior to him. Kelt waved off her anger, which only made her shout more fiercely. After the argument echoed through the guild, Elma brought the discussion back to the request. He proposed exploring in a party of 4, using the same trusted formation they had relied on during their previous expedition. Elma warned the group that there was a high possibility of a traitor among the raid participants. Kelt immediately said the mission had already seemed shady, and adding betrayal made him even less willing to go. Elmer explained that this was precisely why he wanted two trustworthy companions beside him. Kelt turned to Mabel and asked whether she truly agreed. Although she suspected they might have been deceived or that Elma was being crafty, Mabel calmly said she was willing to join and did not dislike being relied upon. Kelt shouted in disbelief at how quickly she accepted. Before he could retreat from the table, Mabel grabbed his coat. She reminded him that he had once tried to run away alone after Elma saved him, and said the coward would probably join now to repay his debt. Kelt begged her to wait and let him think, but she dragged him back into the conversation. Mabel said she understood Elma's character from their previous journey and believed he would not pull them into something logically impossible. A high-level dream hole remained frightening, yet their combined skills made the proposed party sensible. Luce agreed, and Elma said Mabel's confidence might be an overstatement, but she was right to trust the four of them. Elmo explained that he knew the submerged Ideal City's monsters and terrain. Two powerful specialists were more valuable than filling the party with inexperienced attackers, and their four roles could handle nearly any situation. Mabel then mocked Kelt for nearly dying while gathering loose coins, but also admitted that organizing capable parties suited him. Kelt had more useful judgment than his appearance suggested, even if he hated hearing it. Kelt finally conceded that an A-rank healer and two B-rank rookies could not safely raid alone. He agreed to lend them his strength, completing the trusted party of four. Elma thanked Kelt and Mabel. Mabel immediately hoped to profit from their success, while Kelt wondered aloud whether quitting before the mission might still be possible. On the day of the large-scale request, the convoy raced through the forest toward the submerged Ideal City. Its wheels pounded over the rough road, while deer and birds scattered from the trees. Roughly 20 carriages traveled together, carrying Elma's party and around 100 mobilized armored troops. Several soldiers sat packed into the coaches in full helmets and plate armor, showing how seriously the nobles treated the mission. Inside one carriage, Elma sat with Mabel, Kelt, and Luce among the armed escorts. Mabel looked across the crowded compartment and remarked that about 20 carriages and 100 troops appeared to have been mobilized. The scale of the force made the group's intentions impossible to mistake. Everyone was being carried toward a major battle before they had even reached the level 80 dream hole. Luce wore a newly purchased outfit and happily thanked everyone for noticing it. Her gear included singer's shoes, which provided a small increase to luck. She looked so pleased and energetic that the others teased her about the dramatic change. The cheerful exchange briefly eased the tension inside the crowded coach, even as the convoy continued toward a level 80 battlefield. During the journey, Elma reviewed the skills he had gained as a heavy knight. When Vow of the Heavy Armor reached class level 49, he acquired the special skill knight's conviction. He opened his status and saw that he was now level 74 with 8 skill points waiting to be allocated. Luce excitedly asked whether he had gained a new skill, and Elma confirmed that he had wanted to spend those points together according to a plan. Knight's conviction granted resistance to sleep and frenzy, and it could completely nullify frenzy as a status ailment. Luce called the effect amazing. Elmer explained that both sleep and frenzy were dangerous conditions that defensive classes were not designed to handle, and that will offered barely any passive protection against them. The skill represented a knight overcoming harmful conditions through sheer strength of will. Although Elma knew a way to use his remaining points, he admitted that his intended allocation would not work at that moment. The next skill he wanted required him to expose choices that he preferred to keep secret. He had already revealed the status values of both companions before, so allocating his own points in front of them felt awkward. Elma also reviewed the regular skill Magic Guard, acquired when Vow of the Heavy Armor reached class level 57. It covered his shield with magic and increased the shield's defensive power whenever an attack landed. Together, Knight's conviction and magic guards strengthened the stability that a heavy knight needed, but Elma still had to choose the right moment to reveal and spend his points. Elma turned to Maybelle and apologized before asking her for a small favor. He recalled her skilled tree from memory after seeing it only once. She had placed 42 points into Staff of Faith, 20 into Druid's Curse, none into basic staff combat, and still had 5 points available. Maybelle pointed at herself in surprise and asked whether he truly meant her. When Elma repeated every number correctly, she and Celt stared at him, amazed that he remembered everything from a single look. Elma apologized for startling them and asked whether any of those values had changed since then. Maybelle said they had not and wondered why it mattered. Elma explained that he wanted to create an opportunity for her to gain 2 levels. Once she did, he asked her to put every new skill point into Staff of Faith. As the convoy continued beside the flooded landscape, Maybelle agreed because Staff of Faith was already the skill tree she most wanted to develop. The convoy finally reached the entrance to the submerged ideal city, a dream hole with a recommended level of 80. Strange pale creatures crowded the flooded ground outside the stone arch while the carriages rolled past them. Luce asked what the eerie things were, and Elma recognized them immediately as Yumiani. He identified the monsters as level 63 and explained that they used their numerous tentacles for both attack and defense. If an opponent kept its distance, and Yumiani could also strike with water magic. Luce stared through the window and unexpectedly said they looked kind of cute. Her companions fell silent and looked at her in disbelief. Celt then asked where Elma had obtained such detailed knowledge about an unfamiliar monster. Elma avoided that question and awkwardly said that, depending on how someone looked at them, the creatures might perhaps be cute. Luce glanced back at the crawling Yumiani, realized how strange her comment sounded, and hurriedly apologized. The Yumiani suddenly attacked with a forest of whipping tentacles. Elma warned that the soldiers were pulling the monsters too close to the carriages, and his party moved to intercept. He cut through the creatures at the front of the convoy before they could overwhelm the formation. Celt called Elma unrefined, but admitted that once they entered the dream hole, everyone would be relying on the heavy knight again. Several Yumiani splashed through the flooded ruins and converged on Elma. He met the first creature head-on, parrying its tentacles and smashing it aside with shield bash. Celt watched Elma handle each attack with practiced control and realized that gathering enemy aggression was the true role of a heavy knight. With every monster focused on Elma, Celt raised his enormous bow from a safe distance. Elma noticed the unusual angle and asked where he was aiming. Celt drew the string tight and released a single arrow across the battlefield. The shot pierced the small eyeball swaying above Yumiani's head. Elma was startled that Celt had deliberately targeted such a tiny moving point. He praised the archer's accuracy, and Celt casually replied that he could not miss at that distance. Maybelle then observed that Celt had been snatching the finishing blows until then. Celt looked irritated by her teasing, but his precise support was already giving Elma and the rest of the front line exactly the opening they needed. And Yumiani lashed out at Luce, but she sprang over its tentacle and drove the creature back through the shallow water. Another monster recoiled as she closed the distance with her dagger ready. Celt asked whether Elma intended to rely on Luce for the finishing blow every time. Elma explained that jesters were built around speed and rapid attacks, so their compatibility against a heavily defended Yumiani was normally poor. Luce did not wait for the argument to finish. She watched the monster's movements, slipped inside the mass of writhing tentacles, and committed to a direct strike. Her dragon slayer thrust crashed into the Yumiani with enough force to launch its huge body away from her. The creature's eye stalks shook as the blow connected, and the finishing strike killed it outright. A system notice awarded Luce 446 experience points. Celt stared at the result, struggling to reconcile the jester's smaller weapon with the explosive power he had just witnessed. The defeated Yumiani flew high into the air before dropping out of the fight, and Luce cheerfully announced that they had brought one down. Kelt stood frozen and asked what he had just seen. Elma explained that Luce had acted as the lure in the Cemetery of Sorrows, but attracting enemies had never been her primary role. Her true specialty was attacking. Kelt had barely processed that answer when 3 more Yumiani rose from the flooded ground and surrounded Luce. Their heavy bodies churned the water as their eye stalks turned toward her. Luce clenched her daggers and muttered that every one of them was looking at her. Maybelle immediately raised her staff and formed an intricate snowflake of magic at its tip. She aimed the freezing spell across the water to slow the closing monsters and give Luce space for another assault. Maybelle released her magic across the flooded ground, sending ice toward the advancing Yumiani and slowing its rush. She gripped her staff and watched the enemy through the cold spray. One creature fixed both of its swaying eyes on Luce, then thrust a thick tentacle toward her with sudden speed. Luce braced as the limb closed the distance, but Elma read the attack before it could land. He triggered Shadow Stomp and crashed into the Yumiani from the side, knocking its tentacle away and forcing the monster's attention onto him. Elma calmly told the creature that Luce was not its target. His interception opened a clear path behind the monster's guard. Luce immediately sprang forward with both daggers drawn, twisted through the air, and drove back toward the exposed Yumiani while Elma held its aggression. The party's timing turned the attempted ambush into another coordinated attack. Luce drives the Yumiani back and warns everyone that water slash is coming. Kelt fires at the critical instant, interrupting the threat with another accurate hit. Luce secures the kill, receives 510 experience points, and celebrates while the others praise Kelt's clean supporting shot. With the battlefield cleared, the Heavy Knights admit that the level 63 Yumiani were formidable even after their senses were numbed. They are even more shocked by Luce's extraordinary experience gain. Elma explains that her build sacrifices some explosive power, but her agility lets her adapt freely without conditional restrictions. After the last Yumiani dissolved into dark remains, Luce excitedly called everyone over to inspect the battlefield. One monster had dropped an item, then she found another beside it. Elma noted that her drop rate boosting skill was working, and that the way an adventurer built a class could matter greatly. Luce proudly lifted 2 netted black crystals. Maybelle recognized the rare items as Ocean's Tears and explained that alchemists used them to make unique healing potions. She added that a person could drink one directly and be healed. Kelt sniffed a crystal but refused to swallow it. Elma then revealed that a single Ocean's Tear sold for about 6 million gold, making Kelt shout at him for sharing such critical information so casually. Maybelle advised Kelt not to handle the valuable drops carelessly and to place them in the magic bag. Kelt nervously asked whether the items were poisonous. Nearby armored retainers watched the group, and one observed that Elma's party had become the center of attention from the moment the raid started. One armored retainer complained that whenever Elma became involved, everyone talked about him and forgot Isabella, even after their lady had displayed her own progress. Isabella stood before her assembled guards and silenced the grumbling with a cold glare. The surrounding soldiers crowded together without speaking, while Elma and Luce swallowed nervously under the sudden pressure. A nervous retainer wondered whether she should be the one to speak, but Isabella stepped forward herself. She addressed Elma respectfully and thanked him again for lending her a hand when she had been in danger at the inn. She also apologized for the way her father had behaved while hosting him. Elma and Luce accepted her words, yet Elma could not ignore the strange aura surrounding Isabella. Its unnatural feeling left him unable to settle his thoughts even while she stood calmly before them. Kelt then blurted out that she was the daughter of Count Halrode, startling her. Another armored woman was surprised that Isabella had come with a party this time and quickly pulled her away from the exchange. Maybelle explained that this was the first time she had seen Isabella in person, while Kelt told Elma that the stories about their acquaintance were apparently true. The retainer urged Isabella to gather herself and try again, but Isabella only trembled in embarrassed silence. Isabella's retainer abruptly turned on Elma's party and ordered them not to stand there demanding gratitude. She reminded them that they were adventurers invited only to round out the numbers, while Isabella and her retainers were the real stars of the investigation. She warned Elma's group not to disrupt the work, then announced that she and Isabella would be leaving. The guards marched away with Isabella before anyone could answer. Elma, Luce, Mabel, and Kelt remained together in baffled silence, and Elma finally asked what had just happened. The raid then advanced through the forest to a rocky archway filled with swirling water. Armored guards took positions around the flooded entrance and watched the churning dream hole while the investigation prepared to move inside. The raid passes through a swirling gate of water and enters the level 80 submerged capital of dreams. The ruined palace is drowned from floor to ceiling, with shattered statues and eerie figures emerging from the black water. Elma remembers the mission's order of priorities. First, they must expose the hidden traitor, and then they can regroup to defeat the Dream Lord. Count Hardin warned that the traitor had forced a way into the raid and was racing toward the Dream Lord while blocking anyone who drew close. Elma has already discussed a method for identifying the culprit with the others. The party now rushes toward the Dream Lord at full speed, treating ordinary monster hunting as a secondary concern. Halrod's troops remained outside the Dream Hole entrance for more than 12 hours after Elma's party arrived. The guards were there to prevent any possibility of another wandering event. Inside, the supplied map of the submerged capital showed only a few vague passages because almost none of the ruins had been explored. Despite that uncertainty, Elma needed to reach the Dream Lord's chambers before a potential traitor could carry out a scheme. He then asked whether Mabel had gained a level while they culled the devil sea slugs. She apologized and admitted that she had not gained even one. Elma concluded that the creatures had been too weak to provide useful experience and decided the party should avoid them in favor of higher-level monsters. Studying the incomplete map, he explained that a generated Dream Hole route still had to follow a pattern. The entrance and Dream Lord's chambers had to be separated by a predictable distance, almost like pieces of a puzzle. Once roughly 30% of the route was confirmed, the remaining path could be inferred naturally. Luce asked whether Elma could truly read a useful route from the incomplete map, even though nothing seemed to match the document she held. Elma told her to follow his lead and promised to guide them toward the Dream Lord's chambers by the quickest route. The party hurried through the enormous flooded capital, passing cracked columns, broad stairways, ornate stone buildings, and narrow corridors lined with broken doors. Kelt kept his bow ready and warned everyone to prepare for the boss. He pointed out that the map marked a plaza in the next hall. They entered a wide square surrounded by ruined buildings and found the flooded space apparently empty. Elma looked across the open ground and said there was nothing there, but his expression tightened as he reconsidered the silence. Tentacles and eye stalks began slipping from gaps beside the stone walls. More devil sea slugs crawled out from behind pillars and through dark openings. Elma rejected the idea that the plaza was safe just as the hidden creatures poured into the water around them. Luce turned in alarm when a whole swarm surfaced at once, surrounding the party from several directions. Elma ordered Luce, Mabel, and Kelt to go ahead while he held back the devil sea slug swarm. He promised that he could shake the monsters if the others created enough distance. Luce protested that Elma was being left behind and pointed to the large number pursuing him, but Mabel urged her to hurry because they had to trust the role he had assigned each companion. Once the others began running, Luce reluctantly told Elma that the enemies were all his. The slugs closed around him from both sides. Elma activated Magic Guard, caught the first tentacle strike on his shield, and parried another creature away. He watched the monster's positions while Mabel attacked from farther down the route. Her water slash swept across the flooded street and struck one slug with a spinning mass of water. Elma then shoved another enemy into position and slammed it aside with shield bash, driving the creature toward the path he had chosen. Elma's shield bash sent a devil sea slug skidding across the flooded street. He saw the formation tighten and declared that the perfect chance had arrived. Several more slugs splashed after him in a line, exactly as he intended. Elma sprinted ahead of the cluster, controlling the chase while watching their distance. He judged how quickly each monster moved and how far it would pursue before giving up. When another slug rose in front of him, Elma held the root and gave Kelt a small nod. Kelt understood the signal. From a safe angle, the archer released a rapid series of precise shots. His arrows struck one slug after another through their exposed bodies and eye stalks, dropping the clustered monsters into the water before they could scatter. The pursuit collapsed under the coordinated volley. Elma looked back over the defeated creatures and praised Kelt for the excellent shot, while Kelt answered with a satisfied grin. Elma noted that the party had managed to shave considerable time from the route by moving so aggressively. He believed the plan with Kelt had worked exactly as intended. Mabel checked the map and reported that they had already come a long way, placing the Dreamlord's chambers somewhere close ahead. Kelt complained that they were moving too fast and that the other raiders would be left waiting far behind. Elma answered that reaching the destination early was the best option because the ideal outcome required them to arrive before anything unexpected could happen. As they continued through the ruined streets, Kelt suddenly flinched and stopped beside an ornate gate. He said that his sixth sense had triggered and that something seemed to be nearby. Kelt asked whether they could investigate it. Elma preferred to avoid every diversion and keep moving toward the Dreamlord, but he recognized the warning from Kelt's skill. After a moment of hesitation, he agreed that they could enter the shadowed passage and check what had attracted Kelt's attention. As the party pushed through the flooded ruins, Elma calculated that they would soon reach the Dream Lord. He wanted Mabel to gain 2 more levels first, then told Kelt to lead the way. The party passed through an ornate gate and entered another flooded chamber in the ruined capital. Elma, Luce, Mabel, and Kelt spread out across the shallow water and searched the empty room. Kelt suddenly noticed something near his feet. He crouched, plunged one gloved hand beneath the surface, and pulled up a large black crystal shaped like a sharp, uneven prism. Water streamed from the dark object as he turned it in his hand. After examining its polished faces, Kelt identified the rare find as the morning trapezohedron. Kelt paused when Mabel asked what kind of important item he had found. He explained that destroying the morning trapezohedron was one of the raid's objectives anyway, then raised his hand and suggested they simply break it immediately. Before he could finish the proposal, the water beside him erupted. A hidden creature lunged upward with a long, clawed limb and struck Kelt at close range. He cried out, twisted away from the impact, and barely avoided being caught as the attacker burst into the chamber. Elma shouted for Kelt, but the attacker slipped beneath the surface and vanished into the ripples. Stunned by its sudden retreat, Mabel asked Elma what kind of monster they had just faced. Elma reasoned that such a large body could not hide in shallow water. Its movements suggested it could burrow through the ground, and its human fish shape marked it as a mermaid hybrid. Kelt identified it as an extremely rare, evolved mermaid. Ordinary mermaids usually fled from people, so Elma concluded that the crystal had created special conditions and made this one ferocious. Mabel was stunned that it had evolved, while Elma realized it lurked beside rare treasure to ambush anyone lured within reach. Since its full abilities were unknown, Elma decided to draw its attention while Mabel and Kelt attacked from the middle distance. Then he noticed Kelt faltering. Kelt apologized and revealed that the monster's claws had paralyzed him. Elma considered having Mabel treat the paralysis, but he could not track the hidden enemy and protect everyone alone. He changed plans, ordered the party to regroup for one combined attack, and told Mabel to delay healing Kelt and focus on the enemy. She agreed. Elma raised his sword and shield in the open courtyard, while Luce tightened her grip on both daggers. Mabel stepped forward with her staff ready, and the entire party formed a defensive line among the flooded ruins. Behind them, a dark creature stayed low against the surface, and began moving through the shallow water. Its hidden body left a long wake across the courtyard. Kelt noticed small ripples spreading near his boots and suddenly tensed. He tracked the disturbance over his shoulder, realizing that another lurking enemy was approaching before it revealed itself. The attacker was Akuro, a level 76 malicious entity. It lunged straight at Maybell and raked her with its claws before the party could intercept it. Maybell immediately countered by casting ice, but Akuro dove beneath the floor and escaped the barrage. She was shocked that the evolved monster could retreat underground to avoid their attacks. Paralysis made it dangerously hard for Kelt to control his health and use half-dead Avenger. With Akuro hidden again and Kelt compromised, Elma judged the evolved mermaid to be an exceptionally troublesome opponent. Kelt raises his bow and tells the party that he will mark the concealed enemy with an arrow, leaving them only to strike that spot. Across the flooded arena, he spots a dark shape beneath the surface and fires. The arrow cuts over the water and lands beside the lurking figure, but the target shifts before the shot can pin it. Seeing their opening, Elma charges the marked position behind his skeletal shield. The fish-like woman erupts from the water with a scream and slams into him, forcing Elma to brace as her body and claws grind against the bones. Elma meets the creature's charge with a clean parry and sends her sliding through the flooded courtyard. At close range, her patterned eyes remain fixed on him while he shelters behind the horned bones of his shield. Maybell follows the exchange with shield bash, blasting the enemy backward in a burst of water. Roosh rallies the party by declaring that everyone can do this, then drives Dragon Slayer into the creature. As the thrust connects, the monster studies Roosh's face with the same unnerving focus, as though recording both the technique and the fighter who used it. The creature's eye changes, and 3 identical fish-like women appear around Roosh through Doppelillusion. Roosh recoils and reports in disbelief that the enemy has just used her own ability. The monster's gaze shifts with deliberate focus, choosing its next copied technique. One duplicate darts in and slices Roosh across the flooded floor before she can recover. Another follows immediately with drive, seizing and battering her at close range. The coordinated copies prove that the creature is doing more than hiding behind illusions. It is watching the party, reproducing their skills, and turning those learned attacks against their original users. Elma shouts Roosh's name as she crashes into the water, and Kelt sends another arrow skimming across the arena. The shot plunges into the flooded floor, but both Kelt and Roosh are already struggling under paralysis. Roosh kneels and apologizes to the others, while Kelt grips his weapon through the pain. Elma lists the enemy's combined advantages: paralysis, concealment, and the ability to create illusions. He realizes it reached Roosh after disabling Kelt, leaving each fighter slower and easier to isolate. Once paralyzed, their movement is hindered and their speed is drastically reduced, making every escape harder. The paralysis grows stronger, and Elma sees that escaping will become increasingly difficult. Kelt remains crouched in pain, while the scattered party watches the flooded arena for the next attack. Elma searches the surface and wonders where the hidden creature will emerge. Maybell warns that they must heal at least one disabled ally immediately, or the party will be finished. Kelt suddenly tells her to stay alert because the enemy is coming from directly below. Maybell begins raising a magical guard, but the creature bursts from the water beneath her, grabs the staff she uses to block, and slices across her side before she can complete the defense. The creature knocks Maybell across the water and leaves her stinging arm marked with paralysis. It then casts Shadow Stomp, spreading a dark patch across the flooded floor and freezing the party where they stand. Maybell watches in alarm as the enemy dives back beneath the surface. Elma lunges the moment it resurfaces and tries to strike, but the fish-like woman simply watches him with a blank, unsettling smile. His attack stops short because his planted foot cannot move. Elma recognizes the exact drawback the monster has copied. While Shadow Stomp remains active, its user cannot take even a single step. With Shadow Stomp active, the creature can no longer slip underground and lurk unseen. Kelt tells Maybelle to remain calm, then orders her to heal Roosh before helping him because Roosh is the only fighter capable of landing the killing blow. Maybelle clutches her staff and agrees despite the paralysis. Before she can finish, the fish-like woman charges Elma with a scream. Elma raises Magic Guard, catches the rushing strike against his skeletal shield, and resolves to buy Maybelle enough time to heal Roosh. Instead of continuing the attack, the creature suddenly pulls away, drifts across the water, and makes Elma turn in confusion at its unexpected retreat. Elma notices the smallest change, presses his foot into the flooded stone, and watches the creature stare back with its altered eye. When she surges toward him, he meets the rush with another precise parry. The successful counter should create an opening, yet the monster gives him a knowing smirk and slips away before he can follow. It dives beneath the surface, circles beyond his reach, and watches him from the water while his planted stance holds him in place. Elma first rejects the possibility, then understands the meaning of that smile. The creature has learned Shadow Stomp's weakness and knows exactly when its user cannot move to pursue. The creature circles beneath the flooded arena and studies Elma from the water. She judges that a heavy knight without speed will become an easy target once paralysis takes hold. Elma refuses to let her control the distance. He releases Shadow Stomp, pulls his planted foot free, and immediately gives chase. The fish-like woman churns through the water to escape, while Elma pivots and charges behind his massive skeletal shield. His sudden pursuit closes the gap far faster than she expected. As he bears down on her position, the creature's altered eye widens, and she is forced to watch Elma instead of slipping past him toward the disabled party. The creature surges from the flooded floor and crashes against Elma's skeletal shield, spraying water across the courtyard. Elma plants his armored boot, braces through the impact, and drives forward before she can retreat. His shield bash catches the fish-like woman cleanly and hurls her away through a burst of water and broken spray. From above, the scattered party sees Elma holding the center while the target plunges toward the surface. The enemy escapes the shock by diving directly through the flooded ground, leaving only a violent column of water behind. Elma tracks the disturbance and realizes she used earth swimming to vanish below him, a clever escape from the counterattack. Elma confirms that the creature escaped shield bashes, shock with earth swimming, and admits that the move was clever. Even with 4 fighters in the arena, the party still cannot launch a proper attack. Luce's incomplete Dragon Slayer thrust has left a visible cut across the monster's scales, but Elma knows a scratch without a critical hit is practically worthless. Maybelle completes paralysis heal, and Luce announces with relief that the abnormal status is gone. Elma praises both of them for their work. Restored and moving again, Luce grips her weapon, charges across the water, and promises that this time she will wipe the creature out with Dragon Slayer thrust. Elma warns that Doppel illusion makes Luce's plan difficult. Luce insists that she only has to choose the real creature from 3 targets and claims she is good at that kind of decision. Elma explains that she cannot produce a critical hit while hesitating over whether the enemy before her is genuine or an illusion. Dragon Slayer thrust depends on concentration, a stable mind, and absolute certainty at the point of impact. With Luce's raw attack power, she cannot deal significant damage if that critical strike fails. Defeating the creature without Dragon Slayer thrust would be extremely difficult, so Elma concludes that he must catch and restrain the enemy with Shadow Stomp once again. Maybelle says that identifying a non-illusion will be enough, then makes an unexpected move that leaves Elma demanding an explanation. Kelt suddenly warns Luce that the creature is coming for her. 3 identical enemies erupt with Doppel illusion, and Luce stares them down while repeating that she has only a 1 in 3 choice. Maybelle casts Area Heal across the entire battlefield, exposing the target among the copies. 1 creature crashes into the water, and Elma praises Maybelle for creating the opening. He closes the distance before it can hide again, and declares the fight finished as direct slash tears through the revealed enemy. The battered fish-like creature lies half-submerged, gasping as she claws weakly at the flooded floor. She suddenly thrashes again and throws water around her ruined body. Elma calls her persistent, then casts Shadow Stomp and pins her beneath the dark effect before she can escape. With his skeletal shield still raised, he turns toward Mabel and tells her that he is counting on her to finish the enemy. Mabel grips her staff and asks why he chose her. Elma admits that he should have explained the plan from the beginning. Since she needs the experience, he says the best course is to level Mabel up along the way by giving her the final blow. Mabel reluctantly agrees, but explains that the four of them will not always fight as one fixed party. Taking the finishing experience for herself, therefore, feels like snatching points from the others. Before the discussion can continue, the wounded creature drags a claw through the flooded floor and suddenly launches herself at Elma. Luz shouts that the evil creature is attacking, and Elma shifts his planted foot to meet the charge. He catches the fish-like woman with shield bash and blasts her across the water, leaving her snarling and exposed after the impact. Holding his skeletal shield ready, Elma tells Mabel that her turn has finally arrived. Mabel swings her staff into the creature's head while protesting and asking everyone to wait. The final blow lands, and the fish-like body collapses into the water beneath her. Mabel receives 2,048 experience points. Elma asks whether her level increased, and she reports that she rose exactly 2 levels, from level 62 to level 64, though she still calls the result rather poor. Elma explains that he had felt uneasy because he could not properly distribute experience except during their previous battle. Mabel assures him that she was never bothered by it and says she is grateful for the reward despite her hesitation. Kelt observes that the Cemetery of Sorrows also gave the party very little experience, while Mabel notes that this reward was still almost 10 times the usual amount. Luz suddenly announces that the enemy dropped equipment and presents the mermaid's bracelet. The decorative bracelet raises magic power and grants resistance to water and paralysis, making it useful even beside equipment with similar statistics. Elma praises its performance and argues that usefulness matters more than price. Kelt is stunned when he sees a market value of 43 million gold. He insists that price should come first, even while admitting that resistance equipment is handy and magic power is worth raising. Shaking Elma by the shoulders, Kelt declares that his sense of value is completely wrong. Luz declares that the mermaid's bracelet belongs to Mabel because she delivered the final blow. Mabel recoils and protests that such an expensive reward is far too much for her. Luz smiles and reminds her that this was the agreement. Kelt is amazed by how casually the others discuss the treasure and tells them they have become desensitized. Luz notes that she also received valuable equipment after the previous battle, while Elma considers how difficult it would be to find another creature in the deepest part of the dream hole. Luz places the bracelet in Mabel's hands and tells her to equip it. Since the magic boost will make fighting easier for everyone, Mabel accepts the reasoning and fastens the bracelet around her wrist. Elma asks whether Mabel can add her new skill points to the Staff of Faith tree. She opens the priest skill tree, finds Staff of Faith beside her other abilities, and nervously says that she understands. Looking at the valuable bracelet already on her wrist, Mabel worries that she might damage it. She also complains that Staff of Faith does not feel reassuring in battle and has poor cost performance. Luz answers that the ability has a dedicated skill tree, so the investment will not be wasted, and calls it a useful backup for a backup. Kelt clicks his tongue, warns against becoming greedy inside such a high-level dream hole, and tells Elma to save the idea for next time. Kelt abruptly freezes, and his widened eyes fix on something beyond the group. Elma notices the change, stops beside him, and asks what is wrong. Kelt turns away from the party and studies the dark entrance of the ruined building across the flooded courtyard. Elma follows his gaze, while Luz and Mabel fall silent behind them. After listening carefully, Kelt identifies the sound as measured footsteps and says they belong to a person. He warns that someone is approaching the party inside the dream hole. Lou stares in alarm as a shadowed pair of legs advances over the cracked stone, each step bringing the unseen visitor closer. Deep in the moonlit palace ruin, Elma tells his companions not to lower their guard no matter who comes around that corner, because people die more quickly fighting other people than fighting monsters, and a single second of weakness would end them. Footsteps echo through the dark halls, the four turn with weapons ready, and a lone silhouette carrying a long sword descends the grand staircase toward them. The newcomer smiles and says he was certain he was about to encounter their traitor, then breathes in relief that it is only the four of them. The party keeps its blades drawn while he steps down, assuring them that since they were the ones who defeated the Skull Lord, he knows he can blindly trust them all. Elma recognizes him at once and says flatly, "So it was you, Carlos." Carlos preens that his eye was right on the money when he placed his sights on these four, and marvels that they have made it this deep in such a short amount of time, calling them amazing. Elmo explains that he cut a few corners off the designated route on the map because they came to see what had triggered Kelt's sixth sense out here. Kelt agrees with an awkward mumble. Then Elma turns the question back on Carlos, asking what happened to Hilda and the others, since he recalls Carlos saying they were all traveling together as a group. Carlos surveys the four and admits that looking at the results, it is just them after all. He claims a detection skill called presence detection let him find those ahead of him and told him they were no run-of-the-mill adventurers. The real traitor, he argues, should be someone quite powerful, so given Hilda's lack of strength, he asked her to meet up with another party while he moved on ahead alone. Then Rouge tilts her head and asks the question that changes everything. She thought Sir Carlos possessed the skill sixth sense. Is she wrong? Carlos goes silent. Their black-haired companion reasons that a fighting class like a magic swordsman holding sixth sense plus a whole second detection skill tree makes no sense, and Elma narrows his eyes, recalling that the party had already confirmed with Hilda herself that Carlos had sixth sense. Carlos smiles and asks whether Hilda was the one who told them that. He apologizes, saying he never planned on deceiving anyone and simply feels uncomfortable sharing his skills, then admits presence detection was just a bluff and that his true skill is sixth sense. Kelt cuts him off mid-sentence, demanding he hold on, and reminds him he was the one who linked the nobles and the guild to chase these abnormal events. Kelt shouts the contradiction in his face. Carlos claims he has had sixth sense all along, yet he never once detected the presence of that creepy crystal, the lamenting trapezohedron that Kelt himself was the first to report to the guild. Around the plaza, hands quietly tighten their grips on sword and spear. Carlos' eyes dart from face to face as the trap closes around him, his composure cracking one close-up at a time under the party's stares. At last he concedes that he understands how all of this might arouse their suspicions, but he begs them to remain calm and hear him out before anyone does something they cannot take back. He appeals to Elma directly, insisting that surely Elma of all people will understand him, and warns that with a massive crisis bearing down, internal discord is the last thing they should concern themselves with. Elma answers with his blade. Steel crashes against steel as Carlos parries, protesting that he thought Elma was the more rational type. Elmas tells Carlos that the graveyard of grief alibi does not clear him, since an accomplice could have joined the crime. Carlos accepts that suspicion. Elmas recalls studying Hilda's reports from the graveyard and finding no suspicious individual, which had weakened his theory. The reports also said Carlos and his party witnessed the wandering together while he served as their rear guard. Elmas needed proof that someone in the party could detect an abnormality with a skill none of them possessed. While exhausted, he deliberately voiced that possibility within Hilda's hearing, and her reaction confirmed the information he had been seeking. With only a theory, Elmas recounts how Carlos claimed the rear guard sensed the wandering and led everyone to the boss chamber, provoking it. Elmas then spread his doubts among the others until suspicion hardened into certainty. Carlos's reaction would reveal the last item on the checklist, the sixth sense he had tried to conceal. Their weapons crash together. Elma denounces Carlos as a traitor and declares that his betrayals end here. Ruche answers with her multi-hit acrobatics, sending several lines whipping around Carlos from different directions. He tracks every strike, catches the lines in both hands, and snaps them apart, leaving Elma and Ruche stunned by what should have been impossible. Carlos laughs at their shock, then seizes Ruche and hurls her far across the courtyard. Elma shouts her name as she spins through the air, but Ruche lands with a splash in the water below and immediately calls back that she is fine. Carlos withdraws across the courtyard and rises to the top of the ruined structure, forcing Elma to watch him from below. Elma admits that the general investigation had always seemed suspicious. He believed Carlos might be connected to the repeated incidents and to Howlerud's internal conflict, yet parts of that theory never fit and he had no concrete evidence. More importantly, Carlos had sounded sincere whenever he spoke about the kingdom's future and the role adventurers ought to play. His warm exchanges with his disciple Hilda also appeared genuine, not performed. Because that bond looked real, Elma could never bring himself to claim he had definite proof. Elma demands to know whether Carlos truly had a motive strong enough to justify everything. Carlos answers by reminding him that an A-rank adventurer has achieved the dream of a lifetime. He boasts of wealth, power, and fame, then asks why a world overflowing with dream holes should continue to exist as it is. Carlos calls out to Elma, then grabs at his cloak and asks whether Elma knows why the world is teeming with dream holes. Ruche and the others stop in silence, listening from across the courtyard. Before anyone can answer, a harsh ripping noise rolls through the ruined structure. Ruche stiffens and Elma turns in sudden alarm as Carlos holds the pause and prepares to reveal his explanation. Carlos proclaims that Oxeros created humanity, selected the dream god's vanguard as his servants, and despises the world's absurdity and tragedy. He declares that they will save the world by reducing everything to nothingness and says this is why they caused the Zorks. The others recoil, one calling the blackened Flameblade insane, while Elma says he finally understands him. Carlos raises twin spheres of dark blaze, calls Elma forward, and offers to demonstrate the true power of a hero. Elma studies Carlos and realizes something feels wrong. Carlos claims he will save the world, yet he speaks of humanity and every other race as resources to use, not people to protect. His promise rings hollow, almost like a parody. Elma ignores the vanguard backing Carlos and concludes that Carlos's true goal is to perfect himself by mastering and exploiting everything he acquires. Carlos laughs with delight because Elma finally understands him. Elma says Carlos does not fight for any noble cause. He simply lives for battle. Pleased by that answer, Carlos forms a blazing sphere of dark fire, casts dark blaze, and unleashes it so he can enjoy himself. Carlos's blazing spheres crash across the flooded courtyard, smashing through stone and sending water and rubble outward. Elma, Ruche, and the others scatter as one impact after another tears through the ruins. A winged companion twists away from a blast, while another fighter leaps clear as black flames erupt beneath him. Then a fresh orb hangs above Ruche and bears down on her position. She grips her staff, watches it approach, and braces through the fear. At the last instant, Ruche makes a hurried escape. She darts aside with a defiant huff, and the dark fire gouges a long path through the water where she had stood. The assault keeps carving up the battlefield, yet the party survives through careful movement and cover. Carlos praises their precision and the trust binding them together, admitting he expected two of them to die. Elma realizes Carlos's betrayal is the worst possible outcome. Even three fighters cannot bridge the gap to an A-rank hero, and one direct blow from Carlos could kill any of them. Elma reflects that the hero admired as humanity's hope could shake the land to its foundations if he were also its worst criminal. He regrets that he could not bring himself to warn everyone about his suspicion beforehand. Carlos calmly chooses his next target, leaps from the ledge, and vanishes so quickly that the party loses sight of him. Elma sees Carlos poised above Ruche and urgently warns her. Ruche reacts by casting Doppel illusion, splitting herself into 3 matching figures as Carlos dives with his blade. His first sweeping strike cuts through the water and one false target, but the real Ruche jumps away. Her wide eyes show that the attack came dangerously close. Trying to hide her nerves, she calls Carlos a lucky man. Carlos presses the chase, and Ruche sends the remaining figures moving around him. His next slash tears through 2 of the 3 bodies. Ruche notes that he missed 2 targets, but Carlos raises his weapon and mocks her confidence. Their lives, he says, do not rest on some snowball's chance in hell. Ruche and her skeletal familiar rush Carlos together, striking from both sides, but Carlos whips his blade through them with a powerful sweep. The skeleton takes the blow as Ruche invokes Magic Guard, and the defense absorbs enough force to keep them in the fight. Straining under the impact, Ruche tells Elma to hold tightly to his shield. The maneuver sends Elma shooting high above the flooded courtyard, with the skeletal shield beneath him. Ruche stares upward and cries out for Sir Elma's as he rises. Elma's calls her name in alarm, then insists that she is the one still in danger below, not Carlos. The counterattack makes Carlos stagger. Ruche presses forward, while Elma's lands and activates Shadow Stomp, pinning their enemy long enough for her Dragon Slayer drive. Carlos still laughs at the broad attack, saying a skill like that cannot hit a stronger opponent, and he mockingly asks whether Elma's ever taught Ruche that lesson. Carlos continues treating the battle like child's play, but Elma's has nearly exhausted his health. Elma's activates Life Shield, despite Ruche begging him not to use it there. He gambles that the blackened Flameblade's human, A-rank nature will make the effect work, and skeletal power gathers around him. Carlos is finally surprised that Elma's can harness the true power of the Fang of smoldering insanity. Facing Carlos across the arena, Elma remembers hoping his rival had risen through nothing more than ability and talent. Instead, Elma realizes Carlos understands the world's hidden workings and possesses knowledge that even the nobles lack. Carlos plants his foot with crushing force, signaling that the cautious exchange is about to become a direct assault. The sudden burst sends Elma surging through the spray, bracing himself as Carlos closes the distance. Carlos invokes Dragonrage Deathgaze, a skill that doubles both his attack power and his speed. Their weapons crash together, and Carlos meets Elma's charge without giving ground. Carlos warns Elma that skill alone will never be enough to defeat him head-on. Ruche interrupts with Dice Thrust, turning a roll into a rapid series of critical attacks against Carlos. The strange attack flashes past like a grinning shadow, slipping through the space around Carlos's guard. Carlos notices the distortion at the last instant and realizes another attack has already entered his reach. Ruche's critical barrage hammers Carlos from multiple angles before he can completely reset his stance. From across the arena, Ruche keeps the pressure on and prepares another ranged follow-up. Carlos identifies her skill as a critical hit multiplier and admits Elma is not the only capable fighter present. Ruche taunts Carlos by asking whether her attacks are not even worth defending against. She immediately launches a slender projectile, forcing Carlos to react to the new line of attack. Carlos bats it aside as a cheap trick, confident that Ruche's projectile poses no real danger. While Carlos dismisses the shot, Celt drops toward the blind spot behind him before the insult is even finished. Carlos senses the ambush and turns, but Celt is already descending with his blade drawn. Celt unleashes Assassin Attack, driving into Carlos's guard with a violent clash. Elma praises Celt's timing, as Celt boasts that the party has more threats than Carlos expected. The entire party steels itself, vowing to use everything it has to bring the monster Carlos down. Elma orders Ruche to take Carlos from the rear while he attacks from the front, and she agrees. Rush's Pyro class is built for critical hits, letting her prowl through the blind spot behind Carlos. Elma's Heavy Knight class complements her by holding the front and pressing Carlos with direct attacks. Together they form a pincer like an enraged dragon and a grim reaper, closing on Carlos from both sides. Their coordinated rush finally deprives Carlos of the initiative and forces him to answer Elma's momentum. Blades ring across the arena as Carlos blocks a sustained barrage from every direction. Even under that pressure, Elma admits he still cannot grasp how Carlos's skill tree is organized. The party keeps attacking because Elma needs Carlos to reveal the hidden structure of his abilities. Carlos calmly praises the strength of Elma's party, showing that the coordinated assault has earned his respect. Carlos vows to make one party member fall, and Elma instantly orders Rush to retreat to safety. Crimson Wave erupts into a violent vortex as Carlos wonders which fighter will become the sacrifice. Elma throws himself into the attack's path and again commands Rush to get back at once. Carlos fixes on Elma and declares that Elma has chosen to be the first one to die. Unable to stop him, Rush cries out for Elma as the deadly wave closes in. Carlos opens with several dark blaze fireballs that curve across the shattered arena toward Elma. Elma watches their erratic paths, slips past the first barrage, and meets Carlos's charging blade head-on. He parries the sword at close range, even as more black flames descend behind them, proving that the homing attack still leaves a disciplined fighter room to answer. Elma identifies the weakness of Dark Blaze. Because the homing flames move erratically, they can catch their own caster inside the attack. Carlos laughs and says he is impressed by a Heavy Knight moving so quickly, but Elma uses Shadow Step, slips beside him, knocks aside the incoming strike, and answers with a direct slash before Carlos can reset the distance. Carlos stumbles bleeding and asks whether Elma is seriously trying to defeat him. Elma and his companions immediately rush the opening together. Before Carlos can regain control, Luce darts in from the side and unleashes Dice Thrust. Her weapon lands a critical hit across his torso, leaving both Carlos and the watching fighters shocked, while Luce keeps her determined focus on him. The watching party sees Carlos pushed back, and even Carlos admits that the group is strong. Yet the sight of an A-rank hero struggling this way feels wrong. Luce and the others begin to suspect that the battle is exposing something deeper. The staff wielder says everyone is already fighting with everything they have, while Luce anxiously calls to Elma. Elma tells them the battle is proceeding smoothly, and Carlos demands to know what he means. Although Elma is weaker, he has kept parrying Carlos's strikes. Whenever Carlos is pressured, he wastes more energy spreading another attack across the arena just to reset the situation. Elma wonders whether Carlos truly possesses the advanced skill behind this strength. Carlos angrily calls him a spoiled noble playing adventurer, someone who never had to plan or struggle. He accuses Elma of acting superior and simply passing through life with exceptional character and constant success. The companions react in alarm as Carlos turns his frustration into a bitter attack on everything Elma represents. Carlos says Elma even abandoned the mission and calls him the kind of person he hates most. Elma ignores the fury and notices a ring of energy circling Carlos's neck. He identifies the Necklace of Torment, equipment that makes its wearer suffer status conditions and doubles the damage from them. Then he studies Carlos's jagged black sword and realizes the blade is keeping him in a constantly afflicted state. The Blackthorn sword Gehenna grants enormous attack power by continuously poisoning its wielder. Combined with the Torment Necklace, the cursed equipment turns suffering into offense. Carlos's wounds deepen, and the discovery overturns Elma's assumptions about this world's character builds. Elma realizes that character builds in this world have advanced far beyond what he believed, overturning the foundation of his knowledge. The cursed combination before him is one of the strongest player versus player builds he knew. As dark power coils around the jagged sword, Elma asks where Kalos obtained it and who taught him that skill set. He says they should end the battle for that person's sake as well, but Kalos firmly refuses. Elma recognizes the build's apparent immortality. In Magic World, players feared it as the poison zombie build. Kalos' gear carries deadly poison, which doubles status effect damage, and the thorned black sword confirms that the combination is deliberate. With cursed power feeding the chain of skills, Elma remembers the complete setup as the Demon's Feast. Kalos stands amid the wreckage with Demon's Feast active, supported by Blessed Hymn, Dark Energy, and Desperate Beast's Kill. He tells Elma that they will see how long Elma lasts, then strides forward despite his injuries. When another strike cuts his shoulder, Kalos dismisses it as useless. Even the watching swordsman calls him a monster as the wound begins closing instead of slowing him down. Kalos' wounded shoulder starts mending, but the poison lowers his speed and gives Elma a narrow opening. The Blackthorn sword Gehenna supplies absurd power, while Desperate Beast's Kill raises his attack during status ailments. Elma realizes that the power of half-dead Savage Dragon alone is not enough to explain the build. Black Energy then crashes into the ground as Kalos keeps pressing the attack. Kalos closes on Elma through drifting black poison while the haloed healer watches for an opening. Relentless Vigor activates below half health, reduces Kalos' defense to 0, and converts the same amount into attack while consuming mana. Elma says that he and Luce have no chance unless they strike Kalos at the same time. The staff wielder answers that her magic can cure his poison and stop the effect. Luce agrees to the plan, but Elma warns that curing the poison is pointless while Kalos still holds Gehenna. Kalos tells the healer not to approach. Elma rushes him and recognizes how cleverly the sword sustains the build, yet Kalos swings through the assault, orders Elma to disappear, and unleashes Poison Dragon Roaring Slash. The black dragon-shaped wave tears across the arena. Poison Dragon Roaring Slash explodes across the arena and shatters Elma's final life shield. Kalos cannot understand how Elma keeps dodging. Elma admits that he should have predicted the technique, then notices minor poison taking effect and questions his own movement. Across the field, Luce creates another spread of Doppel-illusion clones. Kalos mocks the cheap trick, says she is using the clone skill again, and watches the copies close in from several directions. Kalos cuts through one approaching Luce, but the figure bursts apart as a false image. He realizes the attack was a bluff, just as the real Luce charges from behind with dragon-slaying thrust. Elma warns her not to rush, because the plan requires striking both the rampaging poison dragon and the Reaper at the same time. Kalos decides Luce is easier to eliminate first, then casts Dark Blaze and sends every fireball toward her. Recalling Sir Elamaz's lesson, Luce tries to understand and control the black fireballs racing across the ruined arena. She sends one back toward Kalos, but he detonates it violently and declares that she underestimated him. Kalos says that is his line, calls her a whelp, and unleashes another blast. The barrage catches Roosh, making Luce and Mabel cry out, while Kalos follows with Crimson Wave and warns that Roosh will not survive it. Elma orders Kelt to take care of Roosh. Kelt promises to get her clear, admits this rescue is all he can do, and says they are running short on time. He uses Shield Bash, carries Roosh away, and refuses to release her as the enormous Crimson Wave sweeps across the arena. The blast hurls them through smoke and debris. Kelt finally kneels over the fallen Roosh, apologizes for dropping the ball, and leaves the scattered fighters stunned. Roosh and Mabel call for Kelt after the blast. Elma remains on his feet with only 14 health out of 265, 28 mana, and light poison still draining him. He calls to Mabel, then tells her to take care of Kelt while he faces Kalos alone. Kalos drives another heavy strike toward him and asks whether Elma truly plans to withstand every blow by himself until the others regroup, calling that plan far too reckless. Elma says he will show Kalos what he can endure, while Kalos mocks him as anything but a true challenger and demands that he finally stop talking. Kalos expects the poison to erode Elma's remaining health before Elma's important cooldown returns. Elma answers that Kalos will run out of options first. He blocks with magic guard, evades close strikes, throws aside the skeletal obstacle, and attacks again. Kalos reminds him that healing is possible, but Elma announces that Hydra Break is ready and Kalos is out of time. Kalos prepares a final attack, tells Elma to remember his name, admits he was a powerful foe, and bids him farewell. Instead of finishing Elma, several arrows strike and surround him. Kalos dismisses them as worthless until he notices their true effect. They are enchanted arrows carrying poison protection, a spell that temporarily shields its target from poison. Mabel and Kelt confirm that their improvised protection should work, and Elma praises their perfectly timed answer. Elmer explains that he had not originally planned to involve Kelt and Mabel. Once Carlos became a likely suspect, Elma feared another enemy might possess a poison zombie build resembling it. Carlos was called the Blackened Flameblade, and his dark aura recalled Gehenna's black miasma. As insurance, Elma asked Kelt and Mabel to choose suitable skills. He concealed his real intention, yet they deduced it from his orders and delivered poison protection. Carlos can only curse them in fury. With the protection in place, Luz and the party create the final opening. Carlos cannot believe the reversal as Elma drives through his defense and lands the decisive blow. Careful preparation defeats the supposedly superior build at the last possible moment. Facing Elma across the ruined arena, Carlos drifts into a memory of the small seaside town where he grew up. In its rundown chapel, he received the blessing ceremony and gained the magic swordsman class. He had heard that the class possessed excellent offensive abilities, and the young Carlos felt genuinely overjoyed. Looking back, he admits that he was childish then and simply idolized the heroes he imagined becoming. Carlos admits that helping other people never held any special meaning for him. He was arrogant, dreamed on a grand scale, wanted others to recognize him, and cared mainly about looking impressive. People with the Magic Swordsman class often created conflicts with companions or personal strategies, and Carlos followed that pattern. His poor hometown already had little kindness to spare, so nobody stopped to consider anyone else's pain. Carlos says he was no exception to the town's cruelty. He was falsely accused of theft, had nobody in the guild willing to support him, and became trapped in repeated conflicts of interest. In despair, he fled his hometown by boat. Yet moving somewhere new did not make him successful. As a low-ranking adventurer with no knowledge or useful connections, he remained unable to gain the standing he wanted. In the city, jaded adventurers repeatedly scammed Carlos, while others laughed at him as a country fool. Constant failures forced him to accept that he fundamentally lacked what the profession demanded. People treated him with routine contempt because he did not possess the intuition or combat talent needed to be an adventurer. For someone carrying enormous pride and dreams of heroism, that realization was unbearable, and bitterness began replacing hope. The hardest realization drove Carlos to hate everyone in the world. Then, while he walked alone through a narrow alley, a hooded stranger appeared. The stranger said that Carlos's strength was needed, praised the great talent supposedly sleeping inside him, and called him an extraordinary vessel capable of becoming a hero. Carlos stares in shock as the words offer the recognition he had always wanted but never earned. Carlos admits that even if the hooded stranger's promise was a lie, hearing it made him happy, so he surrendered to those words. Back in the shattered arena, he refuses to lose in such a place. He gathers a dark sphere, unleashes Crimson Wave, and orders everyone to stay away. As the attack spreads, Carlos rushes directly at Elma and swings his weapon down with both hands, clinging desperately to the heroic identity he was given. Elma breaks through Carlos's defense and severs his arm, leaving Carlos staring in horror before collapsing onto the ruined floor. Standing over him, Elma declares that the battle is finished. Luz and Mabel realize they have truly defeated the Black Flame Blade, and immediately call for the poison to be healed. Kelt urges Elma to finish Kalos, but Elma refuses because the fallen enemy still holds answers he needs. Elma considers whether Kalos serves a powerful authority, the envoys of the dream god, or another reincarnator. Kalos curses him for stealing so much time and releases dark blaze from the ground. Mabel blocks it with mana barrier. Elma calls Kalos' grand behavior an act and asks how it felt to perform for everyone. Before Kalos can answer, his furious young follower arrives and demands to know what they are doing to her master. Kalos' follower glares at the party and calls them traitors, insisting that they should be attacking someone else. She raises her weapon, orders everyone away from her master, and refuses to listen. Kalos recognizes that the situation could hardly become worse and sees no way to persuade her. Elma remarks on Kalos' performance. Kalos then calls the girl foolish and reminds her that he never agreed to be her master because he is not fit to guide anyone. Kalos admits that his supposedly noble confidence was only a performance. All he had done was imitate the ideal version of himself that he once believed in. He says Elma truly does have the ability to read people, because when they first met, Elma immediately recognized the truth beneath that proud act. Looking across the shattered arena at Elma, Kalos says he knew from the beginning that Elma was his complete opposite. The admission leaves both men quietly studying each other. Elma asks Kalos to name the people backing him. Kalos remembers himself as a child waiting to die in the streets. He says that if betrayal is what his patron now demands, he will accept it. That person rescued him, saved his soul as a human being, and became the one figure he freely chose to serve. Kalos says he will trust that savior even if the final command is to become nothing at all. Then he collapses with a faint smile. Kelt and the others fall silent as the cost of Kalos' loyalty becomes clear. His devoted follower breaks down and cries for her master, her voice carrying grief across the shattered arena. After Kalos is defeated, the adventurers escort him toward the Dreamhole exit. Elma admits that Kalos was not cunning enough to escape or exploit the situation, so Elma feels guilty for suspecting a desperate scheme. Other adventurers have already been informed, and the mission to defeat the Dream Lord is cancelled. Elma apologizes to the three companions, explaining that he had planned to reveal his suspicions beforehand, but kept missing the right moment. Mabel says she might have believed him sooner if he had named Carlos. Kelt asks the others to spare him that kind of crisis next time. He admits that he remained anxious about when to fire his arrow and could barely keep pace once Kalos suddenly revealed his monstrous form. Elma tells him that his movements were perfect. Kelt distracted the enemy from an excellent position, placed the enchanted arrow at the best possible moment, and avoided exposing their plan. Elma especially thanks Kelt for risking his life to protect Roosh, while Luce listens in surprise. Kelt protests that he is a top-tier scout and claims the ordeal was a piece of cake. When Mabel cuts him down with teasing, Luce says she is being mean, suggests celebrating their massive victory another way, and admits that he deserves a little praise. Kelt scratches his head, embarrassed. Then he turns serious and asks Elma how much of Carlos's skill tree Elma had known in advance. The question forces Elma to consider how much was deduction rather than knowledge. Elma says he did not know the skill tree and had merely assumed the worst possible scenario. Kelt calls that answer unflattering, though Elma notes that the precaution worked. Elma connects the surrounding string of incidents to the dream god's vanguard, but admits they still learned nothing more. Remembering Count Hardin's warning that the enemy was trying to buy time, Elma links the manufactured Zork, the Dream Lord's second evolution, and the Graveyard of Grief raid as attempts to provoke the kingdom's intervention. Elma finally understands what Count Hardin had been approaching. If Kalos's plan had succeeded, there would have been no complications even if someone identified him as the traitor. Instead, the party's resistance caused his careful preparation to collapse. Before suspicion could focus on him, the conspirators spread rumors that the culprit belonged to Count Halrod's family. They also arranged the attempt on Snow's life to reinforce those rumors and prepared this raid while Elma's party was occupied with the previous quest. The failed murder was designed to leave no evidence after the incident because the real objective was to kill Snow. Count Hardin had already narrowed the likely suspect to Carlos long ago, making the surrounding plot even clearer. At the Dreamhole exit, the portal churns above the rocky ground while adventurers gather around it. Elma walks through the shallow water in silence, absorbed by the conspiracy he has uncovered, and Mabel watches him without speaking as the group prepares to leave. While the raid members begin cleaning the area, they decide that everything is finally over and suggest celebrating their victory with drinks. Mabel hesitates, then addresses Hilda across the shallow water. Hilda says her mind has not caught up with everything she witnessed, but she no longer wants to cling to an unreasonable grudge and corner them with it. Turning away with tears in her eyes, she apologizes for attacking the party earlier. Mabel remains quiet and lets the apology stand. Hilda remembers Carlos telling her that her own resourcefulness and hard work were the reason she remained alive. She also remembers his confession that he was not a respectable person and was unworthy of becoming anyone's master. The painful words settle as she closes her eyes. Hilda then walks away through the water and thanks Elma and the others for stopping him. Luce and Mabel watch gently, accepting both her gratitude and the grief behind it. Elma leaves the confrontation with Carlos's shattered emblem as a final reminder. The immediate battle is over, but the broken symbol points toward the conspiracy still waiting beyond the Dreamhole. The party returns to the flooded capital of dreams and enters the Dreamlord's chamber together. Charybdis, a level 90 monster, rises from the water with tentacles spread around the room. Luce tells everyone to call for healing before any critical damage is taken. Lady Snow is recovering better than before, while the others take their practice places and prepare to bring the fight down quickly. Lady Snow says that her recovery has improved, and the front line commits without hesitation. Charybdis lashes through the flooded chamber, while the party keeps its formation around the monster. Snow and the others attack from their assigned positions as Luce directs the pace. Elma judges that the boss is regenerating faster than expected, so the group needs one concentrated burst of damage to finish it. Charybdis attacks with its tentacles, but the party answers immediately. Snow calls for shield bash, then tells the others to follow her lead. Their combined attack lands, and Dragon Slayer Drive tears into the Dreamlord as everyone commits at once. The monster is overwhelmed under the coordinated strike. Its defeat ends the long Dream Loop expedition and leaves the party standing together after the final battle. 3 days later, Elma receives a formal invitation from Hardin Halrod. The letter recognizes Elma and Roosh for their achievements and asks them to attend a special feast. Elma notices that Kelt and Mabel were not invited, so he cannot ask them about the reason. He and Roosh arrive at Count Halrod's estate, where the Grand Hall signals that this is more than an ordinary celebration. At the estate, Lady Snow receives Elma and Roosh with a stiff, formal greeting. She thanks them for defeating the Dreamlord and says she hopes they will continue helping the people she is sworn to protect. Her gratitude is sincere, but her awkward pauses make the exchange uncomfortable. Snow fidgets through the conversation, and Elma watches as the household prepares to bring the guests into the banquet hall. Elma realizes that Lady Snow struggles to speak whenever her father is present, and Roosh quietly sees the same problem. Snow apologizes, admitting that her father constantly forces her to adjust her pace in conversations. They enter the banquet hall, where the family thanks Elma and Roosh again for their help. Elma understands that he has been invited not simply as an adventurer, but as someone connected to the Edvan household. Count Hardin greets the guests with theatrical excitement and calls Elma young Ilmas. He says he has taken a strong liking to him, then praises the Edvan family as impossible to underestimate. Hardin is grateful that the group defeated Carlos, who belonged to the Dream God's vanguard. Yet he admits that Carlos gave them no useful information, leaving the organization and its purpose as dangerous unknowns. Hardin asks whether Elma knows anything about classes and skills, saying he has heard that Elma is well versed in both. Elma remains careful. He explains that he is a disinherited individual with no position to speak for his former home and no authority to satisfy Hardin's curiosity. Even so, he starts to understand why Kelt and Meeble were excluded. This invitation concerns a private conversation about the Edvan family. The Count explains that the kingdom developed its divine blessing research only through major sacrifice. Despite that effort, an unnamed religious organization holds information that exceeds even that knowledge. Elma finds the claim bizarre, and Hardin insists that anyone would want to know where such knowledge came from. He says the group could be connected to a foreign agency, another nation, or a noble faction operating within their own borders. Hardin keeps probing through pleasant small talk, but Elma refuses to reveal the source of his understanding. Snow apologizes for her father's poor communication and asks the guests not to hold it against him. Hardin claims they are merely enjoying friendly conversation, still smiling across the banquet table. Tired of the performance, Elma asks directly what the Count knows about the Dream God's vanguard and forces the discussion toward its real purpose. Hardin says the vanguard must be involved with some unknown existence. He has no single clue, but says their knowledge transcends even his household's research. He suspects an agency from another nation, an organization based in the kingdom, or a noble acting from within the borders. Elma wonders whether this world was created by someone from the Magic World game, and whether that person still remembers the system behind it. A week after the Dreamlord's defeat, the capital streets are busy as carriages roll toward a northern nobles' convention. Elma sits with an open book and reviews what he learned about the Dream God's vanguard. The report identifies the group as an organization plotting the world's collapse, while the arriving nobles signal that a larger response from the northern houses is about to begin. Inside the royal palace, Count Hardin meets the leaders of Houses Villas, Heights, and Edvan around a formal table. He says Duke Burnett has demanded preliminary preparations for a conquest of the forbidden Greatwood. Atlas Edvan objects that a campaign of this scale would normally take years to prepare, not only a few hurried weeks, especially when each noble house must organize its own fighting force. Hardin explains that a rank adventurer caused an artificial monster disaster and was pursuing the creation of a Zork. The gathered evidence shows the conspirators had collected substantial knowledge and skill. He says they must have used another dreamhole for an experiment, choosing the remote forbidden Greatwood because it lay beyond ordinary royal control. The royal family now suspects that the forbidden Greatwood itself was part of the experiment. Hardin presses Atlas, asking whether his objection comes from duty or from loyalty to Duke Burnett's household. Atlas answers that he investigated the land in his role as a noble, but Hardin dismisses that answer and questions whether Atlas's household has the capacity for a major conquest. Hardin says Howlrout can rely on many high-ranking adventurers within the city. He notes that House Heights has amassed wealth through trade, while House Villas commands an exceptionally talented platoon of knights. Then he turns to Atlas and asks whether House Edvan has anything besides the reputation and personal strength of its current master to offer the kingdom in this difficult campaign. Hardin offers to carefully choose skilled adventurers to reinforce Edvan's fighting force. He says the house needs support if it is to avoid disgrace before Duke Burnett during the Greatwood operation. In his view, a household leader cannot depend on personal strength alone anymore. He warns Atlas that being a mighty warrior is not enough to lead a great house through this kind of dangerous campaign. Atlas rejects Hardin's proposal outright. He insists that the nobility's true task is to act as the kingdom's blade and defeat the monsters with their own hands. Hardin calls that belief outdated and invokes Atlas's banished son as an example of weakness. Atlas rises in anger, accusing Hardin of using another household's private affairs as a tool for meddling. Hardin says he has repeatedly stated that he wants every household to avoid humiliation, and he does not personally regard Edvan as an enemy. Even so, he argues that nobility without competence cannot protect the kingdom of Nalson. He warns Atlas to think carefully about the path Edvan will take before the coming conquest of the Forbidden Greatwood. Testimony places Carlos and another rank adventurer inside the Forbidden Greatwood, and Hardin tells every house to prepare. He says the coming conquest will not be a simple expedition. It will uncover the mysterious religious group connected to Carlos, reveal the Dream God's vanguard, and begin a direct war against the full organization behind the threat. Hardin declares that the northern nobles will face that war together. Elma and Roosh arrive in Darkcloud Way, a rough city district filled with taverns, merchants, and people pursuing private deals. Elma says it is the city's seedier side and hopes they can find clues about the Dream God's vanguard there. Roosh complains that he is browsing again, but Elma asks her to stay nearby while they continue through the street. Roosh protests that Elma always gets distracted by shopping, then notices a man being held on the ground by two guards. The captive calls Elma and Roosh by name, and Elma recognizes him as Sir Kelt. Kelt demands to be released and says the men are ganging up on him, while the guards identify Elma and Roosh as acquaintances of their debtor. Elma tells Roosh to leave the dispute to him and asks Kelt what happened. The guards call their boss Robic, who sees Elma and Roosh approaching Kelt and calls their connection favorable. Elma offers to pay the debt instead, but the guards warn that it will be expensive and propose a wager. Their business is the Card Crown, a tavern that also operates as a gambling house. Robic introduces himself and calmly states that Kelt owes 30 million gold. Elma reacts in surprise, while Kelt says the house set him up and insists it is not like that. Robic dismisses the accusation as false and says there is no excuse for what happened at the Card Crown. Elma recognizes that Kelt had been allowed to win first, lowering his guard before the house moved in. Kelt now understands the pattern and says they let him win until he relaxed, then went in for the kill. Robic refuses to accept the accusation and points to the Card Crowns standing on Darkcloud Way. Elma watches Kelt pinned beneath the guards and realizes that the house can deny blame while its victim is left with a debt he cannot explain away. Robic says the nobles overlook this place and warns that complaining to the guards would only create trouble. He then says the debt could be settled if Elma is willing to make a wager. Kelt is promised that, with the wager, his debt will disappear and he may receive 10 million gold. Elma is stunned, but Robic presents the offer with a confident smile. Robic raises the terms by saying the bet will be for 10 million gold, then reveals that Elma is the heavy knight. He says he knows about Elma's showy performance in the raid and calls the wager a way to help a friend. He claims that winning would wipe out Sir Kelt's debt and leave the group 10 million gold richer, while Kelt remains trapped on the floor. Rouge steps forward and says she will accept the wager herself, despite Elma shouting that she is being foolish. She insists that she has never lost a game like this before. Elma warns her that Lady Luck is not an ordinary game, explaining that luck can be controlled through cards, skills, equipment, and strategies that create winning situations. Rouge says she knows how powerful her own luck is. Robic calls Rouge an unusually remarkable young lady, then reaches toward her as he talks. Elma immediately stops him and tells him to keep his hands to himself. Rouge angrily says she hates his nerve, and Robic says her courage makes her worth playing against. With Kelt still held by the guards, the confrontation ends with both sides ready to begin the wager. Inside the casino, Robic invites Lady Rouge to a simplified round of triple noble try, while Elma and his companion watch from the bar. He spreads the deck and explains that each player draws 3 cards, matching triples win, and the higher triple takes the match. Robic promises there will be no swapping or folding, only one clean draw. He fixes the wager at 10 million gold, but Roosh accepts without hesitation, certain that no ordinary game of chance can intimidate her. Robic sets down the shuffled deck and explains that the winner is whoever draws the hand with the highest numbers. He asks Roosh whether she wants to cut the cards first. Roosh declines and tells him to deal them exactly as they are. Her easy confidence makes Robic even more curious about her. A double has only about a 20% chance of appearing, while the odds of drawing a triple are just 0.2%. Robic insists that his pair of fives is not impressive, but privately assumes the game is already his as long as nobody cheated. The watching gamblers grin, and Elma and his companion study the table in silence. Roosh then turns over her cards and reveals 3 tens. Robic concedes that he thought he had won, only for defeat to be handed back to him. Elma examines the deck and realizes that Robic's shuffle carried a subtle but deliberate irregularity. Roosh celebrates the extremely rare triple tens, and Elma confirms that she knew she could draw them. His companion recognizes the trick shuffle and realizes Robic deliberately arranged Roosh's first victory so he could take far more from her afterward. Roosh calmly claims the 10 million gold as hers, but Robic immediately offers her a chance to double the winnings. When Roosh moves to leave, Robic tells her not to hurry because she risks nothing. He explains that a winner may draw one more card, and an ace doubles the original payout. The observers understand that this convenient rule is the heart of his trap. Because an ace is unlikely, Robic can secretly switch cards and manufacture a thrilling double whenever he chooses. That excitement pushes victims into repeated wagers until the house takes everything back. Roosh clearly sees through the scheme, yet she insists on taking her bonus draw before moving on. Roosh places down her card and reveals an ace, bringing her winnings to 20 million gold. Robic asks her to draw again and explains that the doubled bet continues until she pulls something other than an ace. Elma and his companion react, but Robic calls Roosh a very lucky woman and keeps the game moving. Roosh calmly reaches for the deck once more. A second ace would double the payout again, raising it from 20 million to 40 million and making the original winnings 4 times larger. She turns over another ace. Roosh fully reveals another ace, completing 3 aces in a row and driving the payout to 80 million gold. Robic stares in horror and demands to know how it is possible, while Elma and his companion recoil at the result. The gamblers at the bar murmur that they have never seen anyone pull 3 consecutive aces. They wonder whether Robic is finally cornered by his own game, and Roosh calmly calls for his attention. Roosh warns Robic that one more ace will make him owe 160 million gold. Then she slams down exactly that card, turning his carefully controlled game into a crushing loss. Robic refuses to accept the impossible streak. He accuses Roosh of cheating, shouts for the casino guards to seize her, and sends a line of enforcers advancing across the floor. A smoke bomb suddenly floods the room, but Elma decides that letting Robic escape would leave a bad taste in his mouth. Shadow Stomp catches Robic in the haze and stops his retreat. Cornered, Robic curses the many people pursuing him and activates a rune, threatening to kill them now that matters have reached this point. Before he can turn the ambush around, Shield Bash smashes through the card table and blasts him backward. Robic is left beaten, owing Roosh 160 million gold plus the cost of the casino damage. Elma remarks that a man of Robic's rank should have fought much harder, while the other gamblers decide to leave before they are dragged any deeper into the disaster. At a candlelit table with menus laid out, Elma, Roosh, and Celt settle into a restaurant grand enough for nobles. Startled by the prices, Roosh asks if this is really all right. Celt tells her not to worry, since he would have lost his gold if Elma and Roosh had not rescued him, and Elma credits Roosh for nearly everything. Roosh then asks whether Robic's wary associates might retaliate, but Celt says they are not as close as they appear. Elma reflects that gambling usually depends on cheating, strategy, and mind games. None of that matters against Roosh's min-maxed luck. Her fortune is so absurd that even the cockatrice familiars around her continue, surviving impossible situations. Kelt still hates abandoning a payout of 160 million gold. Roosh argues that taking it the wrong way would poison their relationship with the underworld, and Elma agrees that no amount of money is worth provoking that danger. A drunken noble at another table shatters the calm by demanding another drink. Elma glances over and recognizes his own father, Count Edvan. Finding him in La Corina leaves Elma instantly uneasy. Count Edvan slumps over the table with a bottle and demands another drink at once. His attendant stands across the emptied restaurant and warns that he has consumed too much alcohol. He reminds the Count that they must return to their lands immediately because preparations for the great conquest are waiting. Edvan only grunts, clenches his glass, and curses Hardin for embarrassing him before the Hats and Villas household heads. Bitterly, he asks how Hardin can call himself old-fashioned and mighty when nobility means protecting their people and lands while preserving their dignity. The attendant answers with silence. As the restaurant keeps serving both tables, Elma wonders whether nobles from several territories were summoned to La Corina because of the Carlos incident. Roosh notices none of the tension because the meal in front of her tastes far too good. The party leaves in a hurry, with Kelt carrying the remaining food. Outside, Roosh apologizes for rushing away and asks why Elma suddenly insisted on going. Elma explains that his father was inside and suspects a major noble movement connected to Carlos. Since adventurers can never completely cut themselves off from civilization, he decides that the party must prepare for whatever is coming. At the Draconica armor shop, Elma searches for equipment capable of carrying the party into higher-level dream holes. His black steel armor is reliable, but he now needs a real upgrade. The shop offers volcano armor with stronger defense and flame resistance, then ancient armor with even greater raw protection. Elma studies both expensive sets, but concludes that neither one provides the right balance. The volcano set barely improves on his current armor, while the ancient set carries limitations that make its extra defense less useful. Elmo explains that high-rank adventurers need specialized gear, and ordinary store equipment becomes harder to justify as their challenges rise. Instead of settling, Elma decides to search for suitable metal and ask the old craftsman Veruga to forge custom armor. Roosh eagerly supports the plan, then asks the obvious question of where they can find the material. Elma and Roosh search La Corina for a high-level alchemist capable of creating better equipment. Elmer explains that the class can synthesize valuable weapons and items, command constructed attackers, and unleash several abilities at once. They pass the Claydol's scales, where one alchemist makes a stone golem lumber to life, while another sprouts a grotesque creature, bristling with limbs and eyes. Elmer explains that alchemists can synthesize items, command such constructed attackers, and press enemies with several abilities at once, making the class powerful but complicated and very heavy on resources. Because class advancement has stalled, many alchemists have been reduced to serving as lower-ranking aides, and the few high-ranking experts are either kept by nobles for their gold or descend from families that refined alchemy for generations. At the Dwarven Forge, Roosh glares at a strange frog-like creature beside shelves of preserved bodies, books, apparatus, and brewing equipment. Inside, the alchemist Karith welcomes them. Noting that they must be tired after traveling so far, she asks what brought them to her humble shop. Elma asks Karith to synthesize metal suitable for armor. She apologizes and explains that she is only a low-level C-rank adventurer. Her skills are built for battle and service, so she cannot produce any metal worth using. Roosh asks Karith whether any other alchemist could forge armor for Elma. Karith thinks it over, but says she has never heard of anyone so skilled in La Corina. As her cauldron bubbles nearby, she hesitates, then admits there is one rumor that might help them. Karith says the adventurer clan Mithril Whistle may be hiding an exceptionally talented alchemist. Elma recognizes the clan and its elusive champion, Lord Selvar Chamfron, but almost nothing is known about the group's members or internal affairs. Still, rumors have started spreading. Karith's wholesale contacts report that rare items linked to the clan have reached their shops, suggesting Mithril Whistle is selling valuable materials through hidden channels. Elma suspects the clan is hiding its alchemist because any top-tier expert risks being scouted by nobles or kidnapped, making negotiations difficult. Karith agrees that concealing someone valuable would be necessary. She adds that capturing an ordinary worker would reveal nothing, since both the crucial alchemist and Lord Selvar Chamfron are hidden. Karith offers one risky method of contact. If Elma discovers an item the clan is hunting and takes it first, they may approach him. But the same move could turn the entire clan against him and leave them hunting him down. Elma concludes that Mithril Whistle gathers rare materials as a unit and fights high-level monsters to obtain them. He plans to beat their main force to the next target, claim the item, and use it as leverage in a negotiation. Karith warns that the plan is far more dangerous than it sounds. Roosh answers that Elma can handle it, and his confident smile shows that her faith is exactly what he expected. At the Adventurers Guild Library, Elma and Kelt search the request records for Mithril Whistle's next target. They focus on suspicious jobs involving herbs, ores, rune materials, and anything an alchemist could easily turn into gold. Elma tells Kelt that his research is impressive, then asks why someone at his level still has no proper gear. Kelt snaps that he merely wants to repay a debt and tells Elma to stop prying. As he leaves, Elma points toward Mithril Whistle and explains that a clan's equipment, hunting grounds, and skilled members can determine whether an adventurer lives when danger comes at all. Kelt describes Mithril Whistle as a notorious clan that monopolizes hunting grounds and threatens rivals. Its leader, Lord Selvar Chamfron, is a mysterious former knight who was dismissed from noble service for misconduct. Kelt says he understands Elma wants new equipment, but he warns him not to gamble his life for it. Elma acknowledges the concern and says he knows Kelt's rough exterior hides simple honesty. Kelt advises him not to provoke the powerful clan either. Elma calmly replies that, depending on circumstances, he may even poach Mithril Whistle's alchemist, leaving Kelt shouting in disbelief because the guild's strength makes every confrontation dangerous for a lone adventurer who lacks their backing in this town. Elma suspects Mithril Whistle may eventually oppose the Dream God's vanguard, but a pack of unruly B-rank adventurers does not frighten him. Kelt tells him to stay careful, then decides Elma is far more terrifying than any ordinary gang. Roosh reminds them that Halen Halrud and Count Halrud also stand against Elma. If anyone crosses him, she says she would probably pity them instead. While Elma checks the notice board, Roosh searches the crowded shelves for a promising job. Reaching too high, she knocks a loose request onto the floor and apologizes. Elma sees the title, picks up the page, and realizes it is the lead they needed. He thanks Roosh, while Kelt watches the discovery with surprise. The posted raid promises valuable materials from a dangerous monster hunt, making it worth their attention and immediately changing their plans for good. The page describes Trade Route Culling, a recommended level 80 raid. Its goal is to eradicate Orsects that escaped a conquered dreamhole in Orspect Forest Cave. The insect monsters have metallic exoskeletons, and their rare drops can be used to make high-level armor, although those drops are scarce. Those monsters are Orsects, metallic insects with a tiny chance of dropping material used in high-level armor. The raid's level and reward perfectly fit Mithril Whistle. Even if the clan is absent, a large stockpile of raw metal should lure them out. Elma and Roosh travel to Lacorina's rear gate, where the raid party will depart for Orspect Forest Cave. Among the gathered adventurers, they notice a cloak bearing Mithril Whistle's distinctive emblem. The ominous group waiting at the gate confirms Elma's prediction. Mithril Whistle has come for the Orsect hunt, placing his target directly within reach. At the raid gathering, Elma spots a fighter carrying a crimson-red rapier and identifies him as a flame fencer. He notes that the class creates and manipulates flame, then recognizes the man's intimidating skill. Elma complains that La Corina holds enormous authority and dreamhole resources, while surrounding itself with dense, stubborn people who look down on ordinary adventurers. Elma explains that flame fencers can attack with fire from middle and long range, though they lack exceptional endurance and recover damage quickly. Their broad skill tree also lets them build support and healing abilities into their fighting style. A masked woman addresses the swordsman as Master Frang and says that watching inferior adventurers struggle is one of a raid's pleasures. Frang introduces himself as an aide to Mithril Whistle's commander and claims the clan can manage the raid without outsiders. Elma asks whether the pair were holding a secret pre-raid meeting and notes that the woman's equipment marks her as dangerous. Elma tells Roosh that La Corina publicly discourages clans, yet Mithril Whistle has joined the raid and controls hunting grounds, resources, and market trade. When Roosh asks whether confronting them is wise, Elma says their goal is to meet the hidden alchemist, collect the items Mithril Whistle wants first, and force negotiations on equal terms. Frang warns that Mithril Whistle will not deal amicably. He declares that the clan accepts no responsibility if unaffiliated adventurers are injured or crippled during the raid, then punctuates the threat by conjuring a fireball. Elma recognizes the spell and immediately finds it suspicious. Fireball does not belong to the Roaring Flame Fencer tree, and that class already has a complete line of fire attacks, so buying the redundant magic should waste precious skill points. Frang argues that advanced flame magic increases his affinity-based attacks. Elma counters that the same investment repeats abilities his class already provides. The challenge shakes Frang, who falls silent as Elma wonders what he has missed about this world's builds. The masked woman dismisses Elma as a simpleton and insists Frang would never make a mistake since he ranks among the strongest B-rank adventurers. Roosh answers by offering to kill the monsters herself if Mithril Whistle wants to test them. Elma says he only wants to study Frang's strange build, though Roosh wonders whether he is provoking the man on purpose. He considers whether the wasted skills are a deliberate handicap meant to produce some celebrated record. The caravan reaches Orspect Forest Cave, where wheels rumble past rocky ground and the raid finds Orsex everywhere. Roosh is startled by the sheer number of high-level monsters. An Orient standing among them is level 65, confirming that the party has entered a dangerous hunting ground. Elma is satisfied that they have made contact with Mithril Whistle. With so many monsters present, even low drop rates should yield rare materials, so he plans to remain near the clan and collect what they need. Roosh starts to suggest that they stay behind the clan or circle around the swarm, but she suddenly slumps before finishing. When Elma asks what is wrong, she insists it is nothing. In her visual operating mode, however, the horde looks entirely different. What the others see as monsters, Roosh sees as a field filled with rare items waiting to be dropped, and Elma recognizes that her unusual perception may reveal a hidden opportunity. At Orspect Forest Cave ruins, Roosh asks whether Elma is chasing drops instead of Mithril Whistle. Elma answers that both goals matter. The party must find the hidden alchemist, persuade the specialist to make armor, and collect the insectite needed to forge that suit before the raid can continue safely at all today. The ruins swarm with level 65 Orients. Their health and speed are low, but their attack power, defense, and middle-range skills make a full horde dangerous even by Elma's standards. Frang gathers the raid party, announces that the guild appointed him overseer, and says every participant now answers to him. Elma answers that he can accept a leader, but any misuse of that authority will bring a formal petition to the guild. Frang calls him annoyingly sharp, yet keeps the new command. Frang insists that, as overseer, his orders are reasonable and must be obeyed. Elma keeps quiet, deciding that openly clashing with the man in charge will only make completing the raid more difficult. Frang then orders Elma and Roosh to take the vanguard and crush the insects, while Mithril Whistle remains with the carriages because the party has already lost too many people on the way. Elma happily accepts the vanguard order, even after Frang privately mocks the pair as brats who stand no chance against a horde of Orients. Frang admits to his masked companion, Ein, that he means to hold his own people back and join only at the right moment, warning that the two might not stay safe if he is late. As nearby adventurers mutter that Elma and Roosh have a death wish, Elma tells her the Orients are sturdy with close and mid-range attacks, but their slow movements are predictable. Elma tells Roosh that she is an excellent match for the Orients, and she realizes why as he explains their defense. Their endurance comes from their sturdy armor and the self-regen skill, but he refuses to let the insect use that strength in a long fight. When it attacks, Elma meets the charge, parries it cleanly, and knocks it off balance. He immediately calls for Roosh to attack while the monster is open. Elma follows through and drives the Orient down into the rocky ground. Before its regeneration can restore the damage, Roosh is already moving. She launches Dragon Slayer Drive and fires her critical silver bullet into the exposed level 65 monster, blasting it apart and leaving broken pieces scattered across the battlefield. The kill awards experience, and Elma praises Roosh's finishing strike. Frang can only stare as the pair destroys a heavily armored Orient in a single coordinated sequence. Roosh apologizes because the monster drops nothing. Elma tells her not to worry and urges her onward, since the field still contains plenty of Orients to hunt. Mithril Whistle's members watch in disbelief as Elma and Roosh charge deeper into the horde. Frang is left wondering whether their overwhelming performance is some kind of joke. Elma surveys the rocky basin and estimates that roughly 20 Orients are waiting there. When one charges at Roosh, he steps between them and raises his shield. He tells the monster that Roosh is not its target anymore. If it wants to keep fighting, it will have to face him first. The Orient casts Shadow Stomp, pinning its target and threatening to take away all movement. Roosh warns that losing the use of her legs in the middle of this horde would be fatal. Elma remembers the monster's full arsenal: iron claws, high-speed rush attacks, and rock cannon shots they can fire from a distance without coming closer. Elma blocks the incoming rocks with his shield and keeps the Orient focused on him. Roosh uses the opening to close the distance. She cuts in with Dragon Slayer Drive, knocks the monster back, and tells Elma that the maneuver works. She asks him to make another opening so she can keep using him as her footing. The pair repeats the maneuver across the rocky battlefield. Elma takes the Orient's attacks on his shield, redirects their pressure, and keeps their attention fixed on him. Roosh uses his protected position as footing, shouts for one more opening, and springs forward each time he creates one, driving her Dragon Slayer Drive straight into the exposed insects. One Orient after another is blasted apart in a thunderous burst, and the moment each falls another already lumbers in, so Elma resets his guard and holds the formation steady against the surrounding swarm. Another Orient forces Elma into a direct exchange. He admits that he cannot avoid the attack, and that he cannot simply defeat the monster by himself. When its rock cannon fires, he meets it with his shield, then answers with shield bash. Elma follows with Shadow Stomp, slamming the Orient into the ground exactly where he wants it. Elma tells the fallen creature that it dug its own grave and calls Roosh forward. She rushes in, cheers that there is one more for the road, and unleashes another Dragon Slayer Drive. The Orient bursts apart. The victory grants Elma 713 experience points, raising him from level 80 to level 81, while Roosh celebrates beside him after the hard fight. From the rear, Mithril Whistle's members watch the battlefield fall silent around the pair. Frang is stunned by how quickly Elma and Roosh have wiped out the Orients ahead of them. A defeated monster finally drops an Invedite crystal stone worth 26 million gold. It is the material Elma wants, but an alchemist must purify it, and one stone is still not enough for a complete suit of armor. Mithril Whistle recognizes the rare class pair as the Heavy Knight and Pierrot, who defeated the blackened Flameblade. Frang orders his people to pursue them while he remains with the caravan. Elma and Roosh keep advancing, reaching 7 defeated Orients and 3 Invedite drops. Behind them, Mithril Whistle's fighters can barely damage the monsters and begin shouting over targets, healing, and whose attacks are failing. Roosh tells Elma that their 10th Orient kill has brought them 4 Invedite crystal stones. Elma excitedly reports that they made 50 million gold in only a few minutes. Roosh explains that every stone sells for 26 million gold, so the 4 stones have already pushed their haul beyond 100 million. The remark horrifies Roosh when she realizes her financial instincts are becoming distorted. She wishes Kelt were there to restrain her. Elmer admits he left him behind because he feared Mithril Whistle would turn the raid into a mess. Elsewhere, Mithril Whistle's fighters keep hacking through Orients, while one swordsman is knocked back by the fighting. Another adventurer proudly says he has finally defeated his second monster, then asks whether it dropped anything. The reply is no, and the watching party can only curse their bad luck while the struggle continues. A violent shot streaks across the battlefield, clips one fighter, and smashes into the rocky cliff beyond the raid. Frang's masked companion cries out for her master as everyone turns toward the impact. Elma studies the path of the attack, looks up the cliff, and spots a small insect clinging high above them. Its sudden appearance leaves the fighters staring. Elma identifies the insect as a level 77 Scarab of Destiny, a bonus monster like the Golden Rana. The scarab flutters away instead of merely fleeing, and Elma warns that its speed and defense are ridiculously high. It is nearly impossible to catch or damage, but bringing one down rewards the hunters with enormous experience. The scarab casts Panica, a nightmare skill that confuses everyone in range. Frang orders the disoriented raid party to attack the bonus monster no matter what. Frang's masked companion uses Fairy Dancer to accelerate her movements, then strikes with Dragonclaw Dance. The technique lands perfectly, but the scarab's defense of 500 prevents even a single point of damage. Elma tells Roosh they are going to help. Running would normally be the sensible choice, but the confused adventurers will suffer casualties if the scarab remains. He assures Roosh that he has a plan to overcome its speed. A single Scarab of Destiny drop could repay the entire raid. Elma remembers players racing frantically for that exceptionally rare reward, then declares that he and Roosh will be the ones to defeat the monster. Deep in a rocky canyon, the raid is falling apart. A young dagger fighter strains to keep his footing. A woman crowned with a butterfly ornament shields her face from a cloud of stinging insects, and a swordsman grits his teeth as the swarm crashes against his guard from every side. The Scarab of Destiny looms over the scattered adventurers below. A healer plants her feet and casts heal after heal across the field, but an explosion still hurls one fighter off his feet before the magic can reach him. Someone screams Panica as the Scarab dives in its signature charge, streaking past Elma and Roosh. The clan healer cries that their healing cannot keep up with all the attacks, and Frang bellows that anyone who is confused is in the way and must fall back already. A dazed fighter stammers back that if he falls back and isolates himself, the Orients will swarm him. All across the canyon, the adventurers fight on in isolated pockets, and the woman with the butterfly ornament calls out desperately for Master Frang. She begs him to put distance between the clan and that scarab so they can reformulate their strategy, warning that they are in trouble at this rate. Frang scoffs at the very word and snarls that they are only in this mess because his nitwits cannot crush a few bugs. Blade blazing, Frang declares that retreating from this would cost him all credibility. He calls the chaos a perfect opportunity to usurp the clan from the gloomy freak, ordering everyone to focus on squashing the scarab and claim its rare drop for themselves. Watching him, Elma warns that with that attitude his people will die on him, then quietly tells Roosh to draw the scarab's aggro without attacking it and to avoid its Panica at all costs. She answers Roger that and dashes into the open. When Frang howls for anyone, to crush that scarab already, Elma and Roosh cheerfully claim the bug squashing for themselves. Frang splutters that he was not talking about those two, but Elma just grins and tells him he has got it, leaving a stunned clansman gaping as something whips past. While the others battle the shrieking insects, the bugs go bouncing wildly across the canyon floor. Elma ignores the chaos and studies the terrain instead, his eyes tracing a cluster of jagged rock spires and a single towering stone pillar. He marks a bare tree trunk, then a sheer cliff face, silently mapping every solid obstacle in the arena. His expression settles into calm calculation, and standing ready with sword and skeletal shield, he concludes out loud that this plan will work. Elma shouts across the canyon for Roosh to stand directly across from him, calling her name over the ridge. She answers that he has got it and sprints into position, while the scarab of destiny races overhead, blindingly fast yet utterly predictable in the way it moves. Roosh wonders aloud whether she can even land her Dragon Slayer drive against something that fast, and Elma tells her not to worry. Once the scarab crashes into an obstacle, it immediately charges back in the opposite direction, and every ricochet so far has followed the exact route he planned. When it dives at him with another panica, he says he accounted for that too, and answers with a shield bash. The scarab slams its diving charge straight into Elma's raised shield. He grinds against the impact with a growl, refusing to give ground, and the beast ricochets away from him, exactly along the path he prepared. Elma drops onto the rebounding scarab's shadow with Shadow Stomp, planting his foot and pinning the boss in place, while Roosh realizes that at this speed she can finally hit it. Too bad for you, Elma tells the beast, his foot already set, as Roosh drives her blade home with a cry of Dragon Slayer. Elma smirks at the perfectly executed trap, while Frang and his clanmates gape in open disbelief, shouting in shock. Roosh roars the word drive as she completes her technique, slamming the full attack into the pinned scarab of destiny. With one final coordinated strike, the raid party obliterates the scarab of destiny in a blinding burst. Roosh leaps from level 77 to 79, Elma climbs from 81 to 82, and the dust finally settles over the battlefield. The boss leaves behind the Hermes coin, a relic of a lost civilization granting 7 attack, occasionally stunning its bearer, and worth 55 million gold. Elma exults that this single item puts the raid in the black, praises a jubilant Roosh, and notes with relief that nobody died. Around the cavern, the other adventurers sag with relief that the bug is finally dead, though watchful eyes track the pair from a distance. Alone, Frang slams his fist into the rock wall, snarling at whoever stole his clan's thunder, while Elma keeps his silence and the moment hangs heavy. The work is not over yet. Adventurers wheel on the leftover insects, one roaring out a Dragon Slayer drive while another slices through the swarm. Elma pins a giant ant with his Shadow Stomp, and a clan swordsman flashes him a grateful thumbs up for the assist. As the excavated cavern quiets, Elma observes they have really thinned out the enemy. Then the tally stuns everyone. 5 Invedite crystal stones, the Hermes coin, 13 Orient magic stones, and the Scarab's own magic stone, worth 232,500,000 gold, their biggest haul ever. Elma studies the numbers thoughtfully. He admits their saving grace was how easily the monsters fell, and that armor synthesis will devour most of the profit. Nearby adventurers still shout for backup against the last enemy groups, while Roosh stands frozen, stammering at the sheer size of the fortune. Then Frang closes in with teeth bared, demanding to know what they are doing getting chummy with his people. He accuses the two of working hard to make him look like a moron. Elma turns grim and says nothing, while Roosh flinches under the clan leader's fury. Frang levels his sword at Elma and demands answers. Whose doing was it? Was it that bastard Lord Selver? Frang is supposed to be an aide serving a hidden master, a clan leader who never fights openly. Elma replies evenly that he simply followed the guild's rules, and joined a raid he thought would be lucrative. Frang scoffs at the feigned ignorance, while Elma privately wonders who this Lord Selver even is. Dropping the question, Frang grips his blade and names his price, 3 of their Invedite crystal stones plus the coin rare drop. Elma reads him coldly, sensing Frang wants no unsightly scene and that a faction war churns beneath all this. Frang warns that paying is the only way the 2 of them return to town in one piece. Elma counters that depending on the conditions he could let go of 2 crystal stones, and that is his maximum concession, privately planning to pump Frang for information about their alchemist. Frang erupts that Elma is in no position to add conditions, insisting the first to damage the scarab was Ein of his own clan. Behind Elma, Ein trembles, remembering how her strike once left the scarab unscratched at full health. Frang whips a flame-wreathed slash through the air and asks whether the 2 would rather die here and now. Elma answers that if Frang is that insistent, he does not mind settling this with a duel. Caught off guard, Frang starts to admit the knight has moxie, then catches himself. Elma warns that a duel would only end in Frang's humiliation in front of his own clan, and repeats his offer of 2 Invedite crystal stones. He begins to name a favor he wants in exchange when screams erupt as a monster appears out of nowhere, and sweat breaks across his face. The creature is a rust baby, level 57, an insect crowned with an eerie human face. Muttering that something is not right, Elma calls to Frang, then officially cancels the raid and orders anyone with a detection skill to scan the area. Frang shouts to ignore him, but an adventurer casts search anyway. The detection grid lights up the cavern and exposes a vast hidden swarm of rust babies surrounding them all, and a horrified adventurer chokes out that this has to be a joke, just look at how many there are. Panicked voices ring across the rocky pass as adventurers cry out that an entire horde of monsters is surging up from beneath the ground. A fighter squares off against a strange mantis creature, and someone admits they have never seen that monster before, while Elma mutters that he does not believe the thing is an existence-evolved monster. The ground keeps rumbling as more insects claw out of a collapsing mound, and stunned fighters shout that this has to be a joke. Standing over the first carcass, 2 of them note that it did not put up much of a fight, yet they wonder uneasily what it actually was. The swarm floods the whole basin, and one adventurer demands to know where they all came from. Another answers the darker question, asking whether the creatures were waiting underground for the exact moment the escort would be exhausted. Before anyone can respond, a ragged scream echoes from the direction of the carriages. Elma whirls around and shouts, asking whether the insects are hiding under the carriages too. The answer comes instantly as the earth beneath the convoy detonates, hurling wagons end over end, and the surviving drivers scramble in terror while insects tear through the shattered wreckage around them. Then something far larger splits the ground open. A towering figure rises from the crater, a long-haired queen with a pale human-like mask of a face, and the appraisal marks her as a rust queen, level 84. Shaken onlookers say it looks exactly like an existence-evolved monster. Sprinting across the field, Elma judges that a level 84 enemy is far too heavy to engage with a surprise attack. He recognizes the underlings as preying mantis orsects and remembers that Orsect Forest Cave is supposed to be home to Deathscythe. Just like with Patchwork, he notes, this is a monster you are assumed to flee from on sight. Studying the queen, Elma concludes it is almost certainly the existence evolution of Deathscythe, and yet its stats are not outstandingly high. The real danger, he realizes, is that this is a type of monster that can mass-produce underlings, and it is already birthing more. Elma grits his teeth and admits this is not good. A trapped driver shrieks for someone to help him as a mantis bears down, and Elma answers by slamming in with Shadow Stomp, planting himself between the man and the blade like forelimbs. One fighter hurls herself at the queen with a defiant shout, but the blow lands and the monster does not even flinch. Up close, its mask splits open into a dripping, fanged maw with writhing feelers, and the attacker recoils, shuddering at what she is actually facing. The queen throws back its head and screeches out insanity's resonance, and the whole brood answers. Roosh grits her teeth under the pressure, while Elma, sweating, works out that it must be a skill that forces fighters to focus on a chosen enemy. On cue, the insects scuttle in from every side at once. The party hacks through the press, but someone cries that this is endless. Another insists their only chance is to create an opening to strike the queen, while Elma counters that charging through a horde like this will be brutal, warning everyone not to fall for the skill because they are the ones being outpunched. On top of that, he adds, Roosh has a weakness in this matchup. He runs the math out loud. A critical hit requires bypassing an enemy's defense and striking one perfect spot, and with the rust babies physically shielding the queen, there is no room to aim for it while dodging them. So he bellows the order to focus on thinning out the rust baby numbers while memorizing the queen's movement patterns. Even so, he knows it would be bad to leave the main body untouched for long. Around him, the other adventurers rally, raging that the monsters broke their carriages and that their reputation at the guild will tank, one even laughing that he wanted more of a fight, while a young fighter shouts to leave the drivers to him. Elma blinks at their nerve, caught off guard for a heartbeat. Then his expression hardens, and he lowers his shoulder and drives straight through the scuttling brood, charging across the open ground toward the queen herself. Watching from the ridge, Ein rushes forward and urges Master Frang to go and lend the fighters their assistance. Frang stops her short, telling her to hold up, and flatly refuses, while Ein's eyes narrow as she takes in his answer. Frang says they will simply monitor the situation a little longer, until that mouthy brat collapses in exhaustion. Ein can only stammer his name in disbelief as he settles in to watch Elma fight for his life. The raid against the rust nest reaches its boiling point as Elma throws himself at the queen. Steel screams against her scythe limbs while she studies him coldly through her curtain of black hair, and the heavy knight answers each sweeping blade with his massive sword, refusing to give her a single step. When her strike crashes down, Elma catches it behind his magic guard, sparks scattering across the barrier. The queen only stares at him with pale, empty eyes, and through gritted teeth, he admits to himself that she is far stronger than he had anticipated. Behind the lines, the mood turns ugly. Roosh confronts Master Frang, asking what he is even saying. She warns him that acts serving the enemy's interests during a raid or standing by while someone perishes will only end with them stripped of their adventurer status. Frang simply folds his arms and says nothing, and Roosh can hardly believe what she is seeing. Inside, Frang is seething. He calls Elma a brat who made him out to be a fool, a man who had the gall to spurn his gracious offer to compromise, and he decides with a twisted grin that Elma is getting exactly what is coming to him. His true motive slips out. If those two drop dead, every Invedite drop from this nest becomes his party's alone. Roosh protests that their own members are already struggling out there, but Frang snarls that weaklings have only themselves to blame for imposing on his raid, and demands to know if she plans to ignore his orders. At the front, Elma concedes there is no way to approach the queen's main body. Yet something feels wrong. She does not seem to be setting up an ordinary attack. Her limbs punch into the stone, her brood curls into rolling balls around her, and as her body rears and swells, Elma tells himself to hold on, because this is something else entirely. The answer hits him a heartbeat before it happens. It is a breath attack, and he roars for everyone to get back as the queen's head rears up and her jaws split open over the cavern. Adventurers sprint and dive for any cover they can find, hands clamped over their mouths, but there is nowhere to run. The queen unleashes epidemic gale, a vast wave of poison that floods the cavern floor from wall to wall and swallows the entire battlefield. The toxin reaches even the fighters far behind the front line. Men cry out that it is impossible for the breath to stretch this far back as the poison status takes hold, allies slump where they stand, and even Elma staggers, choking down the pain while a trembling hand reaches out over the fallen. Frang's response is fury. He screams that his poisoned members are utterly useless fools who keep dragging him down, and stomps that he does not need their backtalk when one protests they cannot move. Roosh finally snaps, telling him they have waited long enough and must rush to the wounded, and Frang bellows that he knows that. Surveying the ruined cavern, Elma takes stock. The babies have been cut to less than half their number, and if that is true, the dead one lying in the queen's own spray proves something vital. The brood carries no immunity toward poison. The queen's breath endangers her own children. Then a scream cuts across the field, warning Frang to look below him. The mound at his feet ruptures, and before he can move, a blade erupts from underground and punches clean through his body in a spray of blood. The formation is broken. Poisoned survivors sink to their knees across the field, gripping their weapons with shaking hands as the remaining mantises close in around them, every fighter fighting just to stay upright. The queen shrieks in triumph over the shattered raid, but the battle is not finished. Doppelillusion floods the cavern with identical illusory copies, scattering the brood's attention, and Elma plants himself before the queen and declares that the one she is fighting is him, telling her to hold her horses. Deep in the queen's canyon, the raid is coming apart. Frangflam breathes his blade in fire and blasts the swarming insects, cursing them as scrap iron filth, and a burning broodling shrieks as the flames finally take it down. Around him, the line is breaking. A wounded swordsman clutches his arm and curses through his teeth, another fighter slumps to the ground, and across the basin the adventurers scatter as the insects press in on them from every side. A status warning brands the capped fighter with abnormal poison. Surveying the field, Elmer admits things are not looking good, that everyone is injured and the battle formation is in pieces, and he decides all he can do is trust the others to pick themselves up. The second frontliner is flagged with poison as well. Elmer resolves to keep drawing the queen's attention for as long as he possibly can, and then a sharp crack sounds nearby as yet another of the monster's eggs begins to split open. The Rust Queen's bloated body pulses with her spawn skill, and Elma mutters that the ability is far more repulsive seen in person. Freshly hatched broodlings scuttle out across the basin, shrieking as they join the hunt, and their cries rise into one deafening screech. The queen herself, a pale woman's torso, fused to a mantis body, screams and swings her scythe arms. One blow booms into the earth as a fighter leaps clear. Her blade clangs off Elma's guard hard enough to stagger him, and he answers with a roaring counter swing that crushes an insect flat. When the queen lunges at a retreating ally, Elma dives in and casts Protect, wrapping the man in a barrier just as the blow lands. The fighter is still hurled screaming into the rocks. Both frontline fighters are now poisoned, and Elma's status card shows his health nearly halved and his mana down to 41, making him curse the spell that drained it. A teammate reports that the coachman and one of the healers can no longer move. Elma realizes that at this rate Roosh, still sprinting circles to hold the broodling's attention, will be worn out first, and that their only hope is the team of 3 that Frang commands in the rear. In the back line, Frang pants for breath and drives his flaming sword through an insect, while his long-haired teammate gasps beside him. Frang's own mana is running dry, and his companions warn him that at this rate they are only burning themselves up without wearing the enemy down at all. Frang declares it is time to withdraw, but his team objects that the poisoned frontliners are too slowed to run, and that nobody has the leeway to defeat the queen below. Frang erupts, demanding how none of the 6 of them prepared any counter to poison, and the Veiled Blade Dancer answers that without a member who can cast Poison Heal, they must thin the enemy numbers before anyone can safely flee. Then she turns the accusation back on him. She reminds Frang that the person who hand-picked members who were not under Lord Selver Chamfron's influence, precisely in order to outwit Lord Selver Chamfron, was Frang himself. His bloodshot eye throbs as the blame lands, and he falters a step backward. The blade dancer shouts that for now they must push the front line troops forward by force, but a magic circle is already glowing under Frang's boot. He ignites Flare Booster and rockets out of the canyon on a jet of flame, while below Elma cries out that he could not possibly be doing this. The stunned party reasons that yes, they are in a tight spot, but this is no mishmashed party, that Frang is a member of real status within the clan, and that running away alone at the 11th hour is the one thing he would never do. Yet Frang shouts down from the sky that every unit is responsible for its own escape, that this is an order from the raid leader, and that is all. 6 stunned faces watch the trail of fire shrink into the distance. The butterfly-winged blade dancer gasps that he cannot be serious, calling after Master Frang as the roar of his boosters fades over the cliffs. She stands frozen with her twin blades hanging at her sides, and then her whole body begins to shake with fury. Her rage boils over as she screams that he actually ran away on his own and brands him a power-abusing jank-billed asshole. The sky above the canyon stands empty where he vanished, and the raid is left facing the truth that their situation has now progressed from poor to the worst possible one. Elma holds the front line as a shrieking rust baby dives at him, and his counter blow hammers it aside. The Rust Queen screams above the crater, while Elma grimly admits that the raid's prospects of victory keep diminishing because Frang has fled. Beside him, another fighter roars and cuts a second insect down. Across the battlefield, the survivors are being ground down, and a cornered brawler pants that he cannot hold out much longer. Roosh sprints into range, gasping for breath, and detonates her Dragon Slayer drive to blast a rust baby apart. Yet even as it falls, fresh eggs crack open across the wasteland. Roosh stares in horror and says it does not matter how many they defeat, because the creatures just keep coming. All across the crater floor, the swarm thickens around the shrinking, exhausted line of adventurers. Elma answers with Dragonridge Deathgaze, and his lightning-charged blade smashes into the shrieking Rust Queen. The blow lands clean, but an underling instantly hurls itself at him to shield its queen, and Elma glares as he realizes the brood will soak up every strike he spends. Nearby, another adventurer is gored with a scream. Elma calculates that if the fight drags on any longer, Epidemic Gale's cooldown timer will be up, and the queen will poison the field again, and he orders himself to think. He admits it feels hopeless, because he cannot even use Dragonridge Deathgaze effectively while they are this outnumbered. Still, he drives himself on, telling himself to think Elma as the insects close in. There must be something, he insists, because if nothing changes, then defeat is waiting, and he just knows it. Then a voice rings out with merciful nocturne, and a wave of shimmering music washes, healing across the battered fighters. Roosh gasps in wonder while the men recognize a dancer's healing skill, crying out Lady Ein's name and sobbing with relief that they are saved. Ein tells the survivors to listen up, because that moron Frang ran away all on his own, and orders them to fight with everything they have if they do not want to die. She swears that if they make it back alive, she will expose his clan misconduct and drag his name through the mud. Elma shouts for her to hold on and keep performing merciful nocturne, but Ein declares that with that moron gone, she is the one in command. When Ein demands to know what he is saying, Elma argues that they need every able fighter they can muster, because a number of healing skills carry a secondary effect that reduces the time spent under an abnormal status. The others back him up, recalling that he saw through the Queen's breath attack right before it hit and moved them to safety, and that he has held his own against the boss as a single tank this entire time. One veteran says that Elma may be young, but he has clearly survived a crazy number of bloodbaths. Another shouts that they should have nothing to lose by following his orders, and behind her veil, Ein clicks her tongue in irritation. The men press on, marveling that a single glance was all it took for Elma to realize that Master Frang had a jank build. Even the sternest fighter offers no argument against him, and Ein falters for a moment, then quietly concedes that they have a point. She remembers Frang screaming that each unit was responsible for its own escape, and calling it an order from the raid leader, while Elma stayed behind and kept tanking the monster. Ein lets out a long sigh, presses a hand to her chest to steady herself, and resumes merciful nocturne. Watching the healing light spread, Elma says their chance for victory has finally come into sight. Ein's healing song washes over the battered adventurers as the Rust Queen looms before them. Elma shouts for everyone to listen, claiming he once heard a story about a monster exactly like this one, with the same characteristics and manner of fighting, though privately he admits the tale is one big lie. Ein answers that she has never seen or heard of a Rust Queen, and while Elma sweats over whether they will believe him, the answer comes that it does not matter if his story is a bluff. Ein warns that without any knowledge of this creature, they have no chance of winning the battle, and she clicks her tongue in frustration. A fighter hurls himself at a drone, while a burly adventurer cries out to Lady Ein in alarm. She sighs that they must make it back alive, or they will never get their revenge on the moron who abandoned them, and she turns to the Heavy Knight, telling him the party will act on what he says. The Mithril Whistle adventurers declare that they will follow the command and demand orders telling them what to do. Elmer explains that Insanity's resonance makes the smaller drones fixate on a single target, which also gives them tunnel vision, so if the party anticipates who each drone will chase, the other members can catch the creatures completely off guard. The Queen's masked head crackles with fury at the regrouping humans. The order goes out to stop preserving mana and charge in unison to cull the drone's numbers. A brawler smashes a drone out of the air with a rising punch. A swordsman carves through another with a sweeping slash, while Roosh leaps in with her twin blades, and with drones littering the ground, the party senses the tide of battle turning in their favor. A small fighter races down the canyon slope toward the Queen, while Elma grits his teeth, telling himself they only need to catch the Queen's drones off guard. Roosh cuts one down with Dragon Slayer drive, and when Elma calls her name, she explains that her side had some leeway, so she thought he could use some backup. She is told well done as another drone bursts apart. Elma urges everyone to keep the momentum going and take down the Steel Queen in one go, and Roosh answers that she has got it. The Queen shrieks and lashes out with her scythe arms, but Elma observes that with Roosh's speed and nimbleness, she handles the Queen's attacks with ease. The furious Queen lunges across the field, and a screeching drone hurls itself into the fray. As a drone charges him, Elma smirks that now is his chance. He trades blows on purpose, grunting as the hits shave his health bar lower, then activates Life Shield with 60 of his 308 hit points remaining, and tells the startled drone that this is just too bad for it. Elma plants his greatsword and triggers Dragonridge Deathgaze, calmly calling the whole reckless gamble nothing more than hit point management. The skill doubles his attack and his speed for as long as his health stays at 20% or less. Elma reads the Swarm Queen's behavior and shouts that being forced to generate more defensive units is proof the monster is cornered, so he calls on the party to finish the fight in one go. Roosh cries out that it has spawned another drone, and as the Queen sweeps its limbs and a mantis leaps in, she answers the rush with a hurled magic die. Roosh lands a critical dice thrust that smashes the scorpion drone apart, and she cheers to Sir Elma that they did it while someone declares the Queen will soon be defeated. Elma stays silent and watchful, because behind its curtain of hair the Queen glares and begins convulsing, gathering something terrible inside its throat. Roosh screams for everyone to look out, warning that the breath attack the Queen used earlier is coming again. While the others brace against the blast, Elmer is already dashing straight in, thinking that naturally he knew when Epidemic Gale's cooldown timer would end, and that a boss immediately jumping to hit hard with it again was completely obvious. Elma meets the opening with a shield bash, taunting the Queen that leaving its goofy big mouth open means getting something stuffed into it. He drives through, roaring that no defense will be spared, and crushes its face, and the Queen shrieks and rears up in agony. While the Queen fixates on Elma, Roosh has already leapt high above its massive body. Elma grins and tells the monster it was too worried about him. Roosh hammers down with Dragon Slayer drive, and when a teammate cries out for Sir Elma, he answers that he is on it. Their combined pincer-finisher carves clean through the queen, and the great insect crashes down defeated. Elma levels from 82 to 83, orders everyone to continue taking out the babies, and the watching soldiers roar in triumph that the queen has been defeated. The party sweeps the aftermath and finds that even the babies dropped in Vedite crystal stones. As the last drones fall, Elma reflects that the enemy was unexpected and powerful, but gaining the trust of the mithril whistle was massive, and he notes that even Rush's fighting form has grown far more precise than it was in the past. She gathers an armful of crystals, calling them more than enough for armor materials and the negotiations with Lord Selver Chamfron. Elma muses aloud that they could have forced the queen to reproduce more and maybe let it roam a while, which makes Rush yelp in horror until he apologizes and admits that scaring her is just his bad habit, and they agree they lacked the bandwidth anyway. Then the queen's own drop appears, a Queen Azul crystal stone priced at 55 million gold, and even Elma stares in blank surprise. Rush delights that even the queen dropped something for them, and Elma checks the tally and announces that it makes 400 million gold. The itemized list of crystal stones, magic stones, and coins totals 394,600,000, and Rush can only stammer the words 400 million in disbelief. As the sun sets over the ruined nest, Elma calls the whole ordeal a blessing in disguise, unfortunate luck against a powerful enemy that ended with good fortunes in spades. Rush asks how many golden Rana blades the money